standard net on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, this Sunday when I interview one of the most significant political figures of our era, Boris Johnson. Nothing will be off limits as we discuss his autobiography, Unleashed, and everything in it.
I failed to avert Megxit, but I did deliver Brexit. And I'm very, very happy to be on Camilla Tominey's show, Boris Johnson on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. and again at 6 p.m.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion, Mark Meets, and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's midday on Saturday, the 5th of October. Where is the month going already? This is the weekend on GB News. Now, there's outrage in the Cabinet as it's revealed the Chancellor plans to cut £2 billion from the foreign aid budget. Could the government face another backbench rebellion already? And Boris Johnson takes aim at Starmer and Rachel Reeves over what he calls a disaster if the UK loses control of Brexit.
Rachel Reeves is now saying we've got to go back into being a rules taker from the EU.
Interesting. And organisers of the latest pro-Palestine protest vow to keep marching until Israel are sanctioned. But is this just a waste of time and taxpayers' money? I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is The Weekend, and The Weekend starts right here and now. Hope you're having a cracking weekend out there. Thank you very much for joining me on a precious Saturday lunchtime. Really appreciate your company because this show is all about you, and I say it every week, but my favourite part of the show is talking to you out there. What you're thinking, what you're feeling, and what you want us to talk about here as well. It's very easy to get involved in the show. Let me know what you're thinking about, what you want to chat about by going to gbnews.com/yoursay and join our conversation. You can be part of the show. The most important part. Keeping me company this hour is contributing editor at Novara Media, Michael Walker, and deputy editor at Conservative Home, Henry Hill. Two great guests for you. It's going to be a fiery debate. But before we get into today's stories, let's get the news headlines with Sam Francis.
Dawn, thank you, and good afternoon to you. It's 2 minutes past 12. The top story, we start in the Middle East, where British nationals are still fleeing Lebanon, with the final and fourth flight set for Sunday tomorrow amid the escalating conflict across the region. Over 250 people have already evacuated back to the UK on government-chartered flights. And the Foreign Secretary David Lammy is warning others to register now, he says, as future flights aren't guaranteed. It comes as Israel intensifies its airstrikes, hitting Beirut and Hezbollah targets, while Hezbollah, in response, has fired 100 rockets into Israeli territory. Meanwhile, the UK has sent £10 million in aid to Lebanon, and troops are now stationed in Cyprus in case of an emergency military-led evacuation if Beirut airport closes. Sir Keir Starmer is urging all remaining British nationals in Lebanon to leave immediately. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is urging Israel to strike Iran's nuclear facilities. That's after Iran launched ballistic missiles in response to Israeli action in Lebanon. Speaking at a campaign event yesterday, Donald Trump criticised President Biden's more restrained approach, saying Israel should prioritise hitting Iran's nuclear sites. The former president called Iran's nuclear threat the biggest risk we face and argued that Biden's refusal to support strikes was a mistake.
They asked him, what do you think about Iran? Would you hit Iran? And he goes, as long as they don't hit the nuclear stuff. That's the thing you want to hit, right? I said, I think he's got that one wrong. Isn't that what you're supposed to hit? I mean, it's the biggest risk we have. Nuclear weapons, the power of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. You know, I rebuilt the entire military. Jets, everything. I built it, including nuclear, and I hated to build the nuclear, but I got to know firsthand the power of that stuff.
Turning back to news here at home, and people will be out on the streets in bigger numbers. That's the warning from Ben Jamal, who's head of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, as pro-Palestine marches continue today across the UK. The 20th National March for Palestine is set to take place in London this afternoon, with numbers expected to rise beyond the number of recent rallies, which drew up to 100,000 people. We're just hearing roughly around 1,000 pro-Palestine activists have started a march from Bedford Square in the capital to Russell Square, with organisers saying they are planning in London to target companies and institutions that they say they claim are complicit in Israel's crimes. Well, Jamal says that protests will persist until action is taken against Israel, highlighting concerns about Britain's military involvement and the potential for a major war. Organisers say the marches aim to show solidarity, to galvanise support and create political pressure. Ukraine is preparing to reveal its victory plan at a meeting with its allies in Germany later this month. President Zelensky says the plan will outline clear steps to ending the conflict with Russia after nearly 1,000 days of war. While the details are still private at this stage, US officials suggest it's just a revised call for more military aid and long-range missile capabilities. The White House has expressed support, but concerns linger about the lack of a thorough strategic framework. Boris Johnson is gearing up to release his new memoir titled Unleashed. It's due out next week, and in a sit-down with Camilla Tominey here on GB News, the former Prime Minister warned it would be a disaster if Sir Keir Starmer tries to reverse Brexit. Mr Johnson also reaffirmed his belief in Brexit, claiming it's given the UK the freedom to act more decisively. And as for the future, well, he insists Brexit offers the chance to do things better. Take a listen to what he had to say.
What do you think Starmer and Reeves are trying to reverse Brexit?
So if we'd been a rules... This is the key point. If we... Yeah, of course they are. Now, if we'd been a rules taker... Yes. At the end of 2020, 2021, we would not have been able to authorise AstraZeneca and Pfizer. No, but you keep interrupting this, because it's very, very important. And that was how, by March 2021... we had vaccinated 45% of the UK population.
The vaccine programme
compared to
will always
10%.
Be part of your legacy.
Thousands of motorcyclists are revving their engines today as they gather for a heartfelt tribute. Riders from across the UK are converging at the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire for the annual Ride to the Wall. The event honours the names engraved on the Armed Forces Memorial, celebrating the bravery of those who served. And our reporter, Jack Carson, is there for us.
Well, 8,000 riders are gathering here at the National Memorial Arboretum today to pay their respects, to pay tribute and deliver an act of remembrance for thousands of those who sacrificed everything for their country. And this year being particularly poignant, as many of those who have ridden here on the bikes around us may well have served in that campaign in Afghanistan, which is 10 years ago this year. So many of those names that we will be looking at on the wall will have a personal connection to the people that have ridden here on these bikes. And it raises money for the National Memorial Arboretum and that charity, with more than £1 million raised in those 16 years.
And from just 13 runners to now millions, Parkrun is marking its 20th anniversary today. The global running movement, which began with just a handful of people in London in 2004, now spans over 2,500 locations in 23 countries. The founder, Paul Sinton-Hewitt, who started the 5K events to aid his recovery from injury, says Parkrun has grown into a force for both physical and mental health. It's now recommended by thousands of GPs worldwide, with weekly events registering over 10 million people. And just before I go, a quick update on news coming to us on those pro-Palestine protests taking place in London. We're just hearing from a few newswires here that pro-Palestine activists have blocked Tottenham Court Road, a major road in the centre of the capital, by gathering outside a Barclays bank. And we're also hearing that a sign has been seen held near the entrance to that bank, reading, and I quote, "Shame on those who looked away from the sadistic genocide of children in Gaza." So that latest line coming to us as around 1,000 protesters are now gathered in London. More on that as we get it. Back now, though, to Dawn.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sam. And as you heard, there is a major march in London today, so good luck if you are trying to travel around. As Sam was just explaining, Tottenham Court Road, one of the major roads in London, has already been cut off. So good luck if you are trying to go about your business in London today. OK, right, let's get straight into today's stories, shall we? We will be talking about that later on as well, and we'll be covering it live to see how the situation develops. Now, there is outrage in the Cabinet today as Chancellor Rachel Reeves plans to cut £2 billion from the foreign aid budget. The Telegraph newspaper have revealed this story as an exclusive. Meanwhile, the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, is among ministers warning of the damage the cuts will do, as spending on aid is set to fall to 0.5% of gross national income. It comes as a Whitehall source says the Chancellor is determined to keep an iron grip on spending ahead of our October budget. You know, the scary one that's coming up. But will the Cabinet backlash force her to reconsider? And should we... I mean, they are in fighting already. I mean, 100 days is it they've been in? And that honeymoon period well and truly over, isn't it? I'm now joined by Peter Barnes, political consultant and a strategist, to explain a bit more about the foreign aid budget and how important it actually is to us. Peter, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Really appreciate your time. Now, foreign aid, whenever we talk about it, everyone goes, oh, scrap it, charity begins at home, etc., etc. How important is foreign aid to this country in general?
Foreign aid is actually really important. It's one of the main tools that we use to influence the world. Whilst we have our obvious permanent seat on the Security Council of the United Nations, you know, paying for things often gets you many friends. You know, it's the same as buying a round of drinks at the bar. You develop a lot of friends very quickly. But beyond that, it actually, you know, when it's used correctly, it does good in the world. And I think Britain being seen to be do good, I don't think is a bad thing. I know the biggest problem with foreign aid is actually how it's spent. And I know it comes under a lot of criticism, particularly from Conservatives, and particularly more to the right of the Conservative Party, and probably Reform now, that, you know, like you were saying, charity starts at home and all that kind of thing. But the world isn't as big as it used to be. And unfortunately, we need countries to do things. But also, more importantly, we often pay countries not to do things. You know, the foreign aid budget is a kind of carrot and stick economy. So it is really, really important for us to maintain it. But I have to admit, $2 billion, it's not really the biggest amount, but this will cause a huge cabinet divide. And the David Lammy in particular, who does like to throw the cash around, will be less than happy.
So, I mean, the total amount at the moment is 15.3 billion. But what you're saying is true. I mean, we should just stop calling it foreign aid and start calling it foreign bribery. Surely that sounds like a better description.
Yeah, 100%. That's all it's ever been, and everybody knows it. And yet we wrap it all up in a nice bit of PR. It's rather preposterous that we call it aid, because it's not. It's often used to buy influence. And if we look at countries like China, for example, they've been using foreign aid to buy up many major infrastructure programs throughout Africa, which has given them direct access to rare essential minerals. You know, like if we look at the 11 billion as well, that's earmarked for these net zero ones. Isn't it really funny that they're going to countries that we actually need a strategic relationship with, whether it be ourselves or our allies here in the West? This is not as everybody's holding hands and singing Kumbaya. This is actual realpolitik. This is how the real world works. We just need to call it a different thing.
Foreign bribery. Thank you very much, Peter Barnes, for actually being so honest about it. I mean, it's what we all thought, isn't it, to be honest? OK, let's see what my panel make of this. Contributing editor, Teeth Backindle, contributing editor at Novara Media, Michael Walker, and deputy editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill. Thank you very much for joining me, gentlemen. Matching haircuts as well. Yeah. Loving it. Right, OK, so let's just call it foreign bribery, shall we, Henry? The aid is the emotive part of this, but it's not. We're just bunging money to countries where we need them to do us favours.
I mean, I wish we were, but that's actually really not how the aid budget works.
Okay.
Basically,
how does it work then?
Well, 20-ish, 25 years ago, there was or actually it was in the 80s, there was a big controversy over something called Pergau, which was basically an arms for aid deal, right, where we gave aid to a country in exchange for them making defence purchases. And since then, there was a real emphasis on putting a complete firewall between the Foreign Office and the aid budget. That's why eventually Overseas Development got its own department. And for a long time, there were real complaints from people in the Foreign Office that you basically had two foreign policies going on. Because you'd have the FCDO go in with Britain's actual diplomatic objectives, and then you'd have Overseas Development go in and splash in the cash without reference to that, because it was a point of principle that overseas aid was not part of British foreign policy in that sense. Now, the merger of the departments might have corrected that a bit, but I do think that it's right that it would be actually much easier to defend the aid budget if it was spent more strategically the way other countries do it.
OK, and Michael, I mean, what do you make of it? I mean, a lot of the foreign aid budget is spent paying for the migrants we have in this country, for caring for the migrants that have arrived here, hotels, etc., etc. What do you make of the 15.3 billion we spend on it? Can we cut that down, do you think?
I think it's justified to spend that much. I know what you're saying, that it's not necessarily directly used as... I mean, I don't think the government would say also that it's a bribe, but you can say that...
I'm sure they wouldn't.
If you're spending it well and in the right places, that can still gain you influence in the sense of soft power. So it might not be the case that sort of you've done this immediate swap, like for like. We'll give you this much money if you do what we want you to do. But if that government is aware that the British government is sending them money for various social programmes. Hopefully, I mean, I'm sure a lot of it does get wasted, but if lots of it is going to the right place, then that will still give you a seat at the table and sort of generate some goodwill towards you.
OK, in 2022, we gave £352 million to Afghanistan. Now, as far as I'm aware, the situation in Afghanistan is not getting any better, so the money we're giving to them, I don't know where it's going, but it's certainly not going to help the women and girls out in Afghanistan, is it, Henry? Do we really need to think long and hard about who we are giving this money to?
I mean, so this touches on one of the bigger sort of fundamental questions about aid spending in general, which is that often it's being, you're targeting it in some of the worst places in the world, but at the same time, that means that you are kind of helping to prop up some of the world's worst regimes.
Exactly.
Because you're providing welfare for their citizens that they may not be providing themselves.
Not much evidence of it in Afghanistan, for sure.
Right, exactly. And then hold on, and then there's the distorting effect it has on the economy. There's the fact that a corrupt government can and will, because it controls access from the aid agencies to that country, it will A, perhaps skim off the top, but B, it can turn some of those aid agencies into effectively PR for that regime. I mean, we remember that Tory MP who was there in a flak jacket in Afghanistan. That was because the agency he was with, they can only say nice things about the Afghan government in order to get into Afghanistan to do the help. So there are all kinds of questions, which is not to say that we should scrap the aid budget or anything, but there are all kinds of complexities when it comes to the ethics of how we deliver aid to these countries.
Michael,
I think we'd need to know a lot more about that money going to Afghanistan before we could make any judgment, because I would be very surprised if that was going via the Taliban. Obviously, Britain was in Afghanistan.
Where else would it be
20
going?
years. We'd be going to NGOs.
But they're getting into Afghanistan via the Taliban.
Well, they'd have to get permission. They'd have to negotiate with the Taliban, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily going to prop them up. And I would imagine that that's probably money going to organisations that were there during the occupation, sort of the American-British occupation, and they didn't want to say, well, we're leaving the country and we're also going to cut off your entire income supply. So they said, we're leaving the country, we're extracting ourselves militarily, but we're going to give you some I suppose, transitional support to various social programmes that might exist. I imagine much of that is going to rural Afghanistan as well.
We imagine, we don't know, and I'm still very dubious because, you know, certainly the lives of women and girls in Afghanistan doesn't seem to be
But
getting
what I'm saying
any
is
better.
much of that could be going specifically to programmes for women and girls.
Yeah, it's not working, then, is it? And we also have Somalia, Yemen, Syria and Pakistan, again, countries where women and girls' lives don't seem to be improving no matter how much money we give to them. But when we have to save money, I mean, we have this black hole, which is 22 billion, and the foreign aid budget is 15.3 billion, and we are estimating 5,000 older people could lose their lives through the cold this winter. Surely we have to assess how much money we are spending abroad and start looking at our own at some point.
Yeah, so this is the trap that Labour have kind of fallen into. Basically, the gap between the public expectations of the state with an ageing population and the tax you can wring from a fairly stagnant working age tax base is just eating British politics alive. At this point, like, we've also almost got a mono-party. Jeremy Hunt and Rachel Roos before the election were fighting over an incredibly narrow strip of economic policy territory, and now she's in it. And what Labour have done is they've gone into an election and, you know, in order to win, they promised not to raise any of the big revenue taxes. And the fact is that if you're not going to raise VAT, national insurance or income tax, you're going to have to keep making cuts. And that's what Labour is doing. And if you're looking at making cuts, foreign aid, as a lot of Tory chancellors have discovered, is easier politically than cutting spending on domestic programmes. So I think it's remarkable to see that Labour have reached this point, as you say, only about 100 days in. But this is just the shape of the future, right? The chancellors finding anything they can cut to avoid making big, painful decisions about raising the major taxes or cutting the major state expenditures like the pension.
Well, I mean, the health and education departments have been ordered to find savings at least £1 billion each as well. I mean, you know, the NHS on its knees, over 7 million on waiting list. Not going to help cutting their budget either, is that?
No, I mean, I agree with Henry here. I think it was a mistake, actually, to rule out raising any of those taxes, because those are where you have one big decision, you take a bit of a hit, but it dramatically increases your revenue, so then you can properly spend that. What the Labour Party seem to have said is, we'll ignore all the big taxes that people know about, and then we'll choose these really small ones everywhere. And what they haven't noticed is that you can get an unexpected hit there. So I think they thought means testing the winter fuel payment, that will be a way we can save £1 billion here. And I think they sort of have about 18 different plans where they save a bit here, raise a bit here, save a bit there, raise a bit there. And what I think they're coming to realise is that each of those things is a potential landmine, right? Because especially if it's impacting only a particular set of people, then they can be very noisy about it. Whereas, I mean, the Tories cut national insurance over and over again and no one noticed. So I think this idea that you can't touch those big...
But they might... I think they notice raises more than cuts. I think that's one of the sort of golden rules
when
of
Gordon
British
Brown
politics.
raised national insurance, that was his most popular budget ever, because he was straight with the public. He said, we're going to increase national insurance by 1% because we want to fund our health service to the same degree that they do in European countries.
I think the rest of the context of that budget was quite important to that, though. Like, it was popular overall, but I think at a point when, you know, what's called tax morale at the moment is really low because people don't feel like they're getting value for money for the taxes they already pay. Overall tax burden, highest level since 1948. Any major tax increase would play very badly with the cost of living crisis framing. Like a tax rise... You can get away with them. Gordon Brown did in different circumstances, but I think that getting away with one now, even if they hadn't made those pledges, would be much more difficult. And even then, structurally, adding a little bit to income tax or VAT or something, you're not going to get out of that kind of doom cycle, because if you project pensions, NHS and social care forwards for 50 years, it's an utterly unsustainable amount of money. And until some party or other actually faces up to that and does something dramatic, we're going to end up basically electing the same party wearing slightly different rosettes.
Which I think a lot of people are commenting we have got at the moment as well. As I said, that honeymoon period hasn't lasted that long. Thank you for now, gentlemen. We are actually going to go live to central London now, where pro-Palestinian activists have blocked Tottenham Court Road by a gathering outside of Barclays Bank. As you can see, those live pictures there, and that is one of the main thoroughfares through the centre of London, if you are aware. And as you see, there's no movement there. Police, I can't see any police presence on those pictures. I'm not sure about you. But the crowd are gathering outside of Barclays Bank, and a sign was being held near the entrance reading, "Shame on those who looked away from the sadistic genocide of mainly children in Gaza and the West Bank." We will have more on this breaking story throughout the show this afternoon, so we will be bringing you up to date on that and seeing indeed how the police do move those protests on, if they do, which would be interesting, won't it? And checking out some of the banners that are being held up as well. We've already seen some supporting Iran and Hezbollah as well, which is interesting. For all the best analysis and opinion on that story and more, please do go to our website, gbnews.com. I'm Dawn Neeson, this is GB News, and there is loads more coming up on today's show. It's a packed show for you. And obviously, we have to talk about Boris Johnson. You may have heard he's got a book out. It's quite quiet about it, isn't it? Anyways, Boris is warning the UK is at risk of losing control of Brexit. Yes, the B word is featured. All of that and much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far. We'll see you very soon.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're talking catchphrases and jingles because, of course, instantly recognisable and sometimes a little annoying in the case of the Go Compare one, perhaps. An iconic advertising jingle can stay in your head all day and sometimes stand the test of time. Sound expert and music designer for some of the world's most renowned companies, Michael Boumendil, joins us now. Good morning, Michael. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
First of all, what is the secret ingredient, the secret recipe for a hit jingle that stands the test of time over the decades?
Well, I have to say that secret 100 years ago is not the secret today, because today all the brands are using music. So the first secret is to stand out, is to make something different, to do something interesting. The other thing I believe is to do something that is true to the brand, that is talking to you. You know, it's not only about the memorability, but it's about telling something about the brand. You know, when I hear you, your voice, your tone of voice says not only who you are, I can recognize your voice, but it says a lot about your mood, your personality. So the other reason why we make successful jingles is because they're catchy, because they're different, but also because they say something to us that is interesting, and finally keeping this link between the brand and the customers.
Michael, tell us about your involvement in the new Maybelline jingle. This makes me, I mean, I haven't heard it, but it makes me a little bit sad because I was an avid Maybelline concealer user for many years. Other brands are available, but the jingle was the main reason why I got bought into it.
You don't have to be sad, because we kept most of the legacy.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back to The Weekend with me, Dawn Neeson on GB News. Now, the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson has told GB News that he believes that it would be a disaster if the government rolled back on his Brexit deal. While taking aim at Starmer and Rachel Reeves, he sat down with GB News' Camilla Tomney. Let's have a listen.
I believe that we're great if we do things on our own. I think we're great if... I think that national independence is extremely important, and I think that that point is proved beyond peradventure of a doubt in Unleashed.
Yes.
Because having secured full national independence, we were able to do things differently, such as the vaccine rollout, such as the AUKUS Pact, such as the taking a different stance from our European partners on Ukraine.
Do you think...
And I think, and I believe, and what worries me now is that the Starmer government is really determined to try to roll all this stuff back, and it will be a disaster. Unless we keep that proper control, we won't be able to do things like that again. So Rachel Reeves is now saying we've got to go back into being a rules taker from the EU.
What do you think Starmer and Reeves are trying to reverse Brexit?
So if we'd been a rules... This is the key point. If we... Yeah, of course they are. Now, if we'd been a rules taker...
Yes.
At the end of 2020, 2021, we would not have been able to authorise AstraZeneca and Pfizer. No, but you keep interrupting this because it's very, very important. And that was how, by March 2021, we had vaccinated 45% of the UK population.
The vaccine programme
compared to
will always
10%.
be part of your legacy.
I love Camilla to bits. She is one of the best political interviewers we have in this country at the moment. And the fact that Boris was going, no, stop interrupting me. She's doing her job, Boris. And I think he probably goes everywhere at the moment with that book glued to his hand. He has a book coming out, by the way. And okay, Camilla's interview, the full interview, is on GB News tomorrow at 9:30. You don't want to miss it. It is a cracker. Now, Michael, the Brexit, the B word. We have been talking about the B word since 2016. And before that, even. It's part of my life. I've grown up with it, nearly. Do you believe that Starmer and Reeves are trying to reverse Brexit as Boris Johnson does?
No, I mean they haven't said anything to that effect. I think it would be surprising. I mean, I was kind of always a little bit bored of the Brexit debate, but I think Britain. The big problem should be in our politics right now that we have a very serious productivity problem. We haven't got richer as a country for a very long time. We need to work out how we can become more productive. Now, if you look at Germany, you look at France. They're the kind of countries we might want to be aspiring to be like. They're more productive. They have higher wages. In France,
we were doing better out of the G7 countries.
You've been believing those Tory lies with it. Well, so the issue there is that, one, they choose the date, but they also say it's total GDP, and actually the only reason we have sort of had growth rates is because we've had an increasing population, as in it's not per capita. So it seems a bit by the by, the whole European debate. I think it would add maybe a percentage of GDP over a period of time if we rejoined the single market, then we'd be rule takers. I think we should probably move on. I think the Labour Party are quite keen to move on. I think Boris Johnson is trying to sell his book.
You cynic. It's my job to be cynical.
Well, I'm just impressed he's in the GB News studio 11 months after he was signed as a contributor.
Well, I mean...
Only to flog his wear with a different company.
Right, I'm sure it's a very...
It's your last appearance.
Reversing Brexit. Are they trying to reverse Brexit? Should they try and reverse Brexit?
Nah. Christ, no. I mean, it would be absolutely amazing if Starmer and Reeves, with an incredibly difficult in-tray and 4.5 years to try and make a difference, decided, you know what we're going to do? We're going to revive the one issue which would immediately add like 10 points to the Tories' poll ratings just by angering everyone so much. So, I mean, the issue with Brexit was always... Most of the public, quite rightly, aren't vastly interested in the hundreds of different international agreements we have over this, that and the other,
You're not
right?
going to list them, are you?
No. I've learned my lesson.
He does know them, though.
I know some of them. But, like, so, there's the single market and the customs union, and they were the big things, and that's fine, we're out of those. But then, do the public really care if we sign a deal over, collaborating on something quite narrow? No, I don't think so. That's the normal part of diplomacy. So I don't think Starmer and Reeves are trying to reverse Brexit. I agree, essentially, that basically this is Boris Johnson's tune, right? I don't think he has anything useful to say about a country which has to make loads of really hard public spending decisions because he didn't want to make them, right? His 2019 manifesto was basically just spend money on the North and hope that it continued to vote for him. He then had to spend all of that money on COVID, and that left him in a very difficult position, which he was brought down by other reasons, but I think he would have handled very badly. So he's talking about yesterday's issue because yesterday's issue is the safe terrain for him. But I think if he ever did want to come back into British politics, actually, we'd be interesting to see if he did have a view on what do you do about pensions, the winter fuel payment, the overseas aid budget, taxes, the kind of things that the government has to deal with today.
And the kind of thing that people are worried about. I mean,
right.
We are worried about how much tax we're paying, we're worried about our mums and dads and our grandparents feeding this winter.
Right, exactly. And I want to hear, because he does clearly still harbour at least a little bit, quite like to come back and be a Tory voice, fine. But let him, with his big audience, talk about the issues that are confronting us today, not the issues on which he sort of triumphed a few years ago.
He does say, Michael, he opens the book, which I'm sure you're going to read, aren't you?
I'll think about it.
Oh. He does open the book,
He's a very good
spoiler
writer.
alert then, with hasta la vista, obviously, see you later, which does sort of kind of imply, not too subtly, that he's not going anywhere soon and will be back in politics.
I mean, he could be. He would have to find an issue, though, that people care about. I mean, I suppose He was a successful politician in elections. In a way, it probably helped him that he got dethroned, because that's less damaging than having actually lost a general election, because he can sort of say, if I hadn't been dethroned by these traitorous backbenchers or by my sort of people who were supposed to be my friends, obviously it wasn't just backbenchers, it was also members of the cabinet, his own chancellor, then he could have said that I would have actually beaten Keir Starmer and the Labour Party. Sort of a kind of Trumpian thing. If it weren't for all of my enemies, I still would have won. And he can never say that he's ever lost at the ballot box. And to be fair to the guy, he has quite a good record at the ballot box. But does he have anything to say? I mean, this whole line that sort of Labour are secretly trying to reverse Brexit, they're actually quite leaky, the party. We're finding out about all the rows that are happening within the first 100 days, which is quite surprising. And we're hearing rows about foreign aid, we're hearing rows about pay, we're hearing all sorts of rows. They're not talking about Brexit.
No.
Actually, you know what he
That's
could.
a good point,
You know what he could talk about if he wanted to actually go after levelling up, right? Reeves has just announced a load of capital spending cuts, right? That's loads of little railways and investment projects across the north of England going. He was the Prime Minister for levelling up, right? He could be talking about that, and that would be much more relevant to today's problems. And instead, Brexit.
Probably not in the book. Oh, right, OK, we have to move on, unfortunately, we're running out of time. So let us see, we've got loads more coming up in today's channel, in today's show. And if you want to watch Boris's interview, I said, it's with Camilla, and you can catch it in full tomorrow on the Camilla Tominey Show from 9:30. OK, let's go back to central London live, where pro-Palestinian activists have blocked Tottenham Court Road, one of the main roads through the city, gathering outside of Barclays Bank. A sign was being held near the entrance reading, "Shame on those who looked away from the sadistic genocide of mainly children in Gaza and the West Bank." We will have more on that breaking story throughout the show. And I'm a bit concerned, I don't know about you out there watching this, I can't see much of a police presence there, and that is one of the main roads through London, which, if you know London, you've ever tried to get from one side to the other, will be affecting most of the city itself. OK, let's go and get some of the news headlines now with Sam Francis, but we will be coming back to that story. Over to Sam.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just after 12:30, and we will return straight to that story. In fact, that hundreds of pro-Palestine protesters are gathered in central London today as part of events marking the anniversary of the 7th of October attacks in Israel. As Dawn was just mentioning, these are live pictures coming to us from Tottenham Court Road, where in the last hour or so, activists have blocked that central street in the capital as part of that march. It comes after around 1,000 protesters started moving from Bedford Square, targeting companies like Barclays Bank and the British Museum, which the protesters, claim are complicit in Israel's crimes. The demonstration is unfolding under what the Metropolitan Police have described as a heavy police presence as part of a wider security operation across the rest of the capital. You can see there various signs being held as well by a number of protesters calling out the action in Gaza. And staying with that story for just a few more moments, we're hearing as well that protesters, in addition to blocking Tottenham Court Road, have also blocked, we hear, Gower Street, that's near the British Museum. Police appearing at this stage to have formed a line there, preventing the group from meeting up with another group of activists in Russell Square. So a number of streets and areas across the capital at this stage appear to have protesters marching and blocking streets. The pro-Palestinian activists that we mentioned just moments ago blocking Tottenham Court Road have gathered outside a Barclays Bank there. Met Police are saying that all protesters must disperse by 5:30 this evening, and we will of course keep a close eye on any developments as the afternoon progresses and bring you the very latest here on GB News. Meanwhile, British nationals are fleeing Lebanon, with the fourth and, for now, the final evacuation flight set for Sunday as the conflict in the region intensifies. Over 250 have already returned to the UK on government-chartered planes, but Foreign Secretary David Lammy is warning others to register now, as future flights aren't, he says, guaranteed. It comes as Israel ramps up airstrikes, hitting Beirut and Hezbollah targets, while Hezbollah, in response, has launched 100 rockets into Israeli territory. The UK, meanwhile, has sent another £10 million in aid to Lebanon and staged troops in Cyprus for a potential military-led evacuation. If If you haven't heard already, Boris Johnson is gearing up to release his new memoir. It's titled Unleashed, and in a sit-down with Camilla Tominey here on GB News, the former Prime Minister warned it would be a disaster if Sir Keir Starmer tries to reverse Brexit. He also reaffirmed his belief in Brexit, claiming it's given the UK the freedom to act more decisively. And as for the future, well, he insists Brexit offers the chance to do things better. Here's what he had to say.
What do you think Starmer and Reeves are trying to reverse Brexit?
So if we'd been a rules, this is the key point. If we, of course they are. Now, if we'd been a rules taker,
yes,
at the end of 2020, 2021, we would not have been able to authorise AstraZeneca and Pfizer. No, but you keep interrupting this because it's very, very important. And that was how, by March 2021, we had vaccinated 45% of the UK population.
The vaccine programme
compared to
will always
10%.
be part of your legacy.
And you can, of course, watch the full hour-long interview with Camilla Tominey and Boris Johnson, 9:30 tomorrow here on GB News. And again, if you miss it, in the evening as well. Well, from just 13 runners to now millions, Parkrun is marking its 20th anniversary today. The global running movement, which began with just a handful of people in London's Bushy Park in 2004, now spans over 2,500 locations in more than 20 countries. The event's founder, who started the 5K events to aid his recovery from injury, says Parkrun has grown into a force for both physical and mental health. It's now recommended by thousands of GP surgeries worldwide, with the weekly events registering over 10 million people. That's it from me. I'll be back with you at 1 o'clock. Now, though, back to Dawn, who I am pretty sure can run a 5K in under 4 minutes flat.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Plenty of sunny spells around this evening, but it will be turning a little bit cloudier as we go through Sunday, with some spells of rain. So the settled weather is all to do with this area of higher pressure out towards the east, but further towards the west we have got some frontal systems, especially across Northern Ireland, and here it's going to be a gloomy afternoon with outbreaks of heavy rain, especially towards the west. Drier for parts of Scotland, but across the north and the west we have outbreaks of rain. Otherwise, a largely fine and settled afternoon across England and Wales with plenty of autumnal sunshine, highs of up to 17 or 18 degrees. Now, as we go through this evening, cloud and rain persisting across the Western Isles and across Orkney and Shetland as we go through the night. But further towards the east, we will see some early evening sunshine, dry here. But as we go across Northern Ireland, cloudy conditions remain, still with some patchy outbreaks of rain. Across much of England and into Wales, a largely dry evening to start, but further towards the west, we have got heavy spells of rain and some strong gusty winds, especially across Devon and Cornwall, as that pushes its way further towards the north and east, but it will start fizzling out as it does so overnight. Cloud will be increasing for many of us. There will still be some clear spells, and where you see the clear spells, we may even see the northern lights towards the far north. Otherwise, a breezy night to come. That will keep temperatures up at around 10 or 11 degrees. So as we start Sunday morning, there will be some brightness, especially across parts of East Anglia, but cloud will start to filter in, so turning a little bit murky into the afternoon with outbreaks of rain and drizzle. Further towards the west, some heavy, thundery rain pushing across Northern Ireland, parts of Wales and into the southwest England, highs of 17 to 18 degrees.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, this Sunday when I interview one of the most significant political figures of our era, Boris Johnson. Nothing will be off limits as we discuss his autobiography, Unleashed, and everything in it.
I failed to avert Megxit, but I did deliver Brexit. And I'm very, very happy to be on Camilla Tominey's show, Boris Johnson on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. and again at 6 p.m.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home? Talking about. Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry, Tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back to the weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. Hope you're having a lovely Saturday afternoon out there, although you won't be if you are trying to get across London at the moment, because many of the roads have now been blocked by pro-Palestinian activists. We've got some live pictures for you. Certainly Tottenham Court Road and many of the streets around there are currently blocked by, as you can see, the crowds. They are mostly gathering outside of Barclays Bank, and they've also blocked Gower Street near the British Museum. I'm just going to read some of your messages out on this one as well. Many of you are not happy. We're covering this live throughout the show, so you don't want to go anywhere. Yeah, Lizzie, summing up pretty much. Hi, Lizzie. Says, these hate marchers should be outlawed. They are supporting terrorists. How many jihad are in that crowd? How many cells have been woken up because of Starmer's policies of arresting innocent people? I assume, Lizzie, you are referring to people that post stupid messages, but stupid messages on Facebook, that sort of thing. OK, I still have my wonderful panel with me, Henry Hill and Michael Walker. Henry, I'm going to come to you first on this one. They're blocking the roads. This is causing chaos in London once again. It's costing the taxpayer millions of pounds. I can't see any police here at the moment, but the police will be there, and that is taking them away from detecting crime in the rest of the capital. Is it time to stop these marches?
This isn't a march. Right, we can have the debate about marches. Marches, I think, are a legitimate form of protest. They're agreed with the police in advance. This is disrupting a public highway, which is causing huge economic damage to the capital and costing an awful lot in police activity. So the police should be clearing this. It should be police doctrine to go in and clear the street as fast as possible, tear gas and truncheons, dob if necessary, and the organisers should be held corporately liable for the costs. So, you know, it's the same with people like Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion. There should be a law in place where if they cause an unlawful blocking of the street or other infrastructure and that costs a certain amount to clear and fix, they, as the organisers, should be responsible for those costs. Because otherwise it's us, the taxpayer, essentially having to stump up time and time again for a small minority of people to cause vast disruption.
It's very, very strong words there, Henry. Michael, what do you make of that?
I mean, I think the image we're seeing there is just the start of the authorised march route. I mean, I've been on some of these Palestine demonstrations, and I have to say, they're very, very peaceful. The reason you don't
from what we can work out,
the reason you don't see many police is because they do tend to just be a march. They aren't like the kind of riots we saw over the summer, where sort of there were very few people, but the percentage of violent people on those marches was very high. These are marches where the ones I've been on, lots and lots of families, lots and lots of people just very, very angry that they're seeing so many children being killed in Gaza. And now people very angry that it looks like Netanyahu is completely committed to sparking a regional war, which isn't going to be in our interest, by the way.
But this is evidently, it's not to do with the actual march. The march will be taking place, but this is blockading the road outside of Barclays Bank because they perceive Barclays Bank to be supporting Israel. So, I mean, and it is now against the law to blockade the streets in this way. So surely they should be cleared.
I mean, that's a policing decision, isn't it? So I think the way the police come to sort of these decisions is they say, is the cost of clearing it going to be not necessarily just financial cost, it's sort of the disorder caused by clearing something going to be more than letting it go there. Well, no, because it's I mean, I think it's the same with whoever you're talking about. What you do, what the cops really care about on these demonstrations is harm to people. So the moment it looks like you're going to harm people, all of the cops will come out. And they care about opposing groups of protesters meeting. So when you see the most cops is when you've got protesters, counter-protesters, and they're trying to keep them apart. And then what you used to have sort of on the student demonstrations is if there was a significant amount of disorder, they would kettle people.
Okay.
Now, this is not a significant amount of disorder.
That is an accurate description of the police's current priorities, but I think that we consistently see when there is disorder and disruption, the public are deeply dissatisfied with the way that the police currently go about things, and I'm arguing sort of explicitly that the police should be more willing to be confrontational if that's what it takes to keep the streets open, to keep the bridges open, to keep public services running. Their current priorities are exactly as you state, but those priorities focus too much on avoiding, confrontation at the expense of serious ceding the public square to minorities at huge cost to the taxpayer and, in the case of anything involving disrupting London, the wider economy.
But that's not too
Sorry, Michael.
Sort of a technocratic decision they've got to make, sorry.
Sorry, Michael. We will be coming back to this. We have to take a quick break now, but we will come back and we'll be covering this march throughout the show. Please don't go anywhere. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News, and there's lots more coming up on today's show as rumours spread around the future of Match of the Day. Is it the final whistle for Gary Lineker? All of that and much more to come, including live coverage of that march for you. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far. We'll see you soon.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
You know, is the fact that electric blanket sales going up actually a good thing? This means that people are switched on to the problems that the winter might hold, that they might have some defence against it, or is it a real indictment of a Labour government that they aren't going to be able to, you know, support elderly people in their hour of need?
Good morning, by the way.
Morning.
I think the sale of electric blankets may well be because we've had this cold snap because of the Arctic weather coming in from the north. However, I think it's an absolute reality that, as your clip said, that over 800,000 elderly people who are eligible for the winter fuel allowance, who can get pension credits, are struggling to apply. And so what is absolutely essential at the moment is that all of those older people who are eligible for pension credits do apply and do get what's owed to them. The benefits are owed to them. And the average that people will get through pension credits is about £78 a week. So that's definitely going to make a massive difference to people who are really struggling.
What can organisations like yours do to encourage people to, I guess, educate themselves on technology and make that first step into the digital world, which is very intimidating at times?
Absolutely, and that's what we do at Good Things Foundation. So we're a national charity. We work all across the whole of the UK. And in your clip there, you had Links Digital, and they're a member of what we call the National Digital Inclusion Network, which is a network of local charities, small local community organisations, food banks, job centres, old people's clubs. So anyone, any organisation at that local level.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe. Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back to the weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. I just want to read this message out from you about the marches in London. This is Raymond. I thought it was now against the law to block roads. Where are the police and why no arrests? Lots of you are saying that, and we will be going back to that march throughout London, blockading streets. It's not a march, as my commentator Henry Hill has just pointed out. It is actually people standing outside of Barclays Bank because Barclays Bank are supporting Israel, allegedly. Any case, should we talk sport? Because it is a weekend, isn't it? Indeed, the weekend. Is the final whistle about to blow for Gary Lineker? Speculation is rife as to whether the Match of the Day host is set to step down. In fact, possibly tonight could be his last show, evidently. Reported an email leak showing a draft statement announcing departure tonight, possibly. So, in any case, we have our sports supremo, I like to call him, Aidan McGee here to explain, is this the last we see of Gary Lineker tonight?
No, Dawn, it won't be. I mean, look, let's strip it back to the start of the week. There was an email in the Mail Online, and they said that it claimed that they'd seen an email that this was going to be his last show. Now, they can't verify whether this email is actually true, accurate. So the BBC, though, were moved to make a statement yesterday saying we have nothing to announce. Now, the context of this is that, look, last year they were very embarrassed, the BBC. They tried to flex their muscle on Gary Lineker. They tried to suspend him, and then the staff started walking out, and they realised they've got a big problem on their hands because the presenter, they've created a monster, and he's more powerful than the organisation itself. So I don't think that played out well with the BBC bosses. It wouldn't do. And so I think long-term there would have been a strategy to remove him from the company. I don't know this for certain, but the contract is up at the end of the season anyway. I don't think any negotiations would start until about January. But that's been mindful, Dawn, because this is one of the few shows on the BBC. It's a flagship show. It's been going since 1964. It's one of the few programmes that actually has increased their ratings over the last 10, 15 years or so. But the general trajectory has been down for the rest of the programming, in common with lots of TV.
It's interesting, the BBC haven't disowned the email that has leaked, has it? They haven't said, no, it's just completely fake, it's nothing to do with us. They haven't said that.
No, they haven't.
Instead, they've launched a witch hunt for the person that leaked the email. So,
yeah,
not
exactly.
really fighting their corner.
No, but I mean, it looks to me as if it was a genuine email sent from a BBC account. I think there were, I'm not going to say the name, but I think somebody I know was involved in it, so it tells me that it was quite genuine.
Yeah.
But having said that, you know, they have to be careful. He's popular, and I think they have to manage any departure. Yeah, he's popular among. I mean, look, people don't tune into Match of the Day because of Gary Lineker. It's a bit like when you sell your house. It's not the estate agent that sells your house. It's the location. It's the decorative order, that kind of stuff. It's the football that sells the show. And Gary Lineker is part of that. The tragedy of all this strategic venture into politics over the last 4 or 5 years is that everyone's forgotten what a fantastic footballer he was for England.
Yeah.
There were lots of younger people who don't even know that he was one of England's top players. He was the record goal scorer for a time. How many times did he dig us out of a hole at World Cups?
Oh, God, yeah, no.
At World Cups and Euro qualifiers.
Great player, and I think he's a great broadcaster, to be honest with you. Whether he's worth 1.35 million in BBC salary, that's another thing.
Exactly. But, you know, he's not going to be short of, as they say in Scotland, somebody else he'll get a piece at somebody else's door. And, you know, he's got the podcasts. As Michael said off air, he's got the podcasts that are important.
Yeah,
he's got, and he loves live football as well.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time, but we will wait with bated breath as to what happens to Gary Lineker. I just got to say now thanks to Michael Walker and Henry Hill for joining me on the panel, and thanks very much for Aidan to join us on the Gary Lineker. But first, let's get a look at the weather, shall we? Here's the forecast for you.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Looking ahead into Sunday, it's going to be turning cloudier with spells of rain and then showery as we go into the new week. But largely settled conditions out there through this afternoon as higher pressure is situated towards the east. Further towards the west, low pressure and frontal systems across Northern Ireland, that bringing some heavy spells of rain towards the west, but also across the West Country this evening, some heavy spells of rain across Devon and Cornwall. As that moves its way towards the north and east, generally fizzling out as it does so, but bringing increasing amounts of cloud across the UK. There may be some clear spells to see the northern lights towards the north, but otherwise temperatures generally mild at around 10 or 11 degrees. Now, as we go through Sunday morning, some clear skies to start the day, especially across northern parts of Scotland. So here, a bright start to the morning. Further towards the west, largely cloudy with outbreaks of rain. And across Northern Ireland, some patchy outbreaks of rain that could be quite heavy at times. Cloudy conditions across the northwest of England. But the best of the sunshine will really be focused across East Anglia as we start Sunday morning. But it won't last too long as the cloud will increase from the west, bringing in some outbreaks of rain and drizzle across much of the country through Sunday morning and into the afternoon. Further towards the west, we have a heavy band of thundery, showery rain pushing across Northern Ireland into South Wales and the West Country too. But generally, temperatures still holding up at around 17 or 18 degrees. So similar to today, but perhaps just a bit of a different feel given the cloudier conditions. Now, as we go through Sunday evening, that band of rain will continue to push its way north and eastwards, affecting much of northern England. But as we go into Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday, it really is a case of sunny spells and scattered showers with highs of 17 to 18 degrees. Bye-bye.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Fist, good luck. GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
It was revealed that former Prime Minister Boris Johnson had what they called a manly pep talk with Prince Harry in an attempt to persuade the Duke to stay in the UK.
Let's talk to former Royal Gardener Jack Stooks and Royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams. Morning to you both. Richard, what do you think? Do we need to forgive and forget?
Well, firstly, I mean, they don't want to come back, and at the moment, absolutely not. I mean, you'd have a circus. Every single royal event that involved the Sussexes, you'd have the focus on them and so forth. It would, in reality, be completely impractical if you consider that in the past 4 years, they've conducted a guerrilla war against the royal family. They've done enormous damage to it.
OK, Jack, I know that over the many years you worked for Prince Charles, you got to know both of the boys very well. And you're a bit fed up with the negative way that certainly we now in the media in Britain talk about Harry.
What have they actually done that's been so awful that Britain can't let them come and go as they please? All they've done is be themselves. So Harry chose to marry Meghan. You know, everybody has an opinion, and completely everybody's entitled to that opinion, like them or loathe them. That's the opinion that people have. But they haven't been given a ban on not coming back to England. So if they want to come back to England, let them come back to England. If they don't want to come back to England, again, they don't need to. It is their lives, and that's what Harry was banging on about at the time. He just wanted to have his life.
The People's Channel.
Good afternoon, it's 1 o'clock on Saturday, the 5th of October, and this is the weekend on GB News. Hope you're having a lovely weekend out there. Thank you for joining me, really appreciate your company. Now, live pictures here from central London where pro-Palestine activists are blocking Tottenham Court Road and Gower Street. Organisers say they plan to target companies and institutions they say are complicit in Israel's crimes. We are live on the ground and we'll be bringing you up to date on that march and road blockades as and when they happen. As you can see, the live pictures there, so far quite peaceful. A lack of police presence, it has to be said. In any case, also in the show, there's outrage in the Cabinet as it's been revealed the Chancellor plans to cut £2 billion from foreign aid budget. Could the government face another backbench rebellion already? And Tory leadership hopeful Kemi Badenoch says not all cultures are equally valid. I want to know, though, is she right? She's had some very big names back her, actually. You'd be surprised. And today marks the annual celebration of cinema's most iconic MI6 agent, Bond, James Bond. I'm Dawn Neeson. Did I do that right? And this is The Weekend. But this show is nothing without you and your views, so please do keep them coming. Lots of you already getting very, very angry about the protest in London, the pro-Palestine protest. David says, absolutely two-tier system, the minority dictating to majority, and where's Starmer? I'm not going to read the rest of that out, Dave. And Sue says these aren't protests anymore, they are terrorists now. The public are too frightened to go into town on Saturdays, and I would say, especially if you're Jewish, you probably will be quite worried about your safety. But what do you think? Please get in touch. It's all about you and your opinions at gbnews.com/your say and join our conversation about the marches or anything else we are talking about today, including James Bond. What's your favourite Bond? Keeping me company this hour is political commentator Kai Wilshaw and broadcaster Mike Parry. Thank you very much for joining me this afternoon, gentlemen. But before we get into today's stories, let's get those news headlines with Sam Francis.
Dawn, thank you very much and good afternoon to you. It's just after 1 o'clock. The top story this lunchtime, as we were just hearing, the latest developments from London, where pro-Palestine activists are now understood to be flooding Russell Square in London. That's just north of Covent Garden, above the River Thames, as part of a mass demonstration in the capital. Protesters, you can see here, have already blocked Gower Street near the British Museum and in Tottenham Court Road in the last hour or so, outside a Barclays bank there. Some of the chants that have been heard include Yemen, Yemen, make us proud, and paint it red. You can also see their live pictures showing a range of placards and posters being held as they march through the city. Police have formed barriers to prevent some groups from joining together, and there is, they say, a heavy security presence across London. The Metropolitan Police Commander Lou Puddleford says that officers are working to ensure public safety. She's also urging people to report any suspicious activity. Well, turning to some other breaking news just coming into us from France this hour. French media reports are suggesting at least 4 people have died, including, sadly, a child, while attempting to cross the English Channel on small boats. That child, understood to be under the age of 4, died off the coast of Boulogne. The 3 other migrants are believed to have died in a separate incident after their boat got into difficulty in the area of Calais. And just hearing from our Home and Security producer, Tom Fredericks, that does mean so far in 2024, 51 people have now lost their lives. That's the highest figure of any year since 2019, when there were, in 2019, 50 deaths recorded. And you may remember on the 3rd of September, in fact, 12 died. That was the largest loss of life in the Channel so far this year. So those 4 deaths may come into that total, and we may see that number rise even further. In other news, British nationals are still fleeing Lebanon, with the final flight set for Sunday amid the escalating conflict across the region. Over 250 have already evacuated back to the UK on government-chartered flights, and the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, is warning others to register now, as future flights aren't guaranteed. It comes as Israel is intensifying its airstrikes, hitting Beirut and Hezbollah targets, with Hezbollah responding by firing 100 rockets. Meanwhile, the UK has sent £10 million in aid to Lebanon, and troops are now stationed in Cyprus in case of a possible emergency evacuation. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is urging Israel to strike Iran's nuclear facilities. That's after Iran launched ballistic missiles in response to Israeli action on Lebanon. Speaking at a campaign event yesterday, Trump criticised President Biden's more restrained approach, saying Israel should prioritise hitting Iran's nuclear sites. The former president called Iran's nuclear threat the biggest risk we faced, and argued that Biden's refusal to support the strikes was, he said, a mistake.
They asked him, what do you think about Iran? Would you hit Iran? And he goes, as long as they don't hit the nuclear stuff. That's the thing you want to hit, right? I said, I think he's got that one wrong. Isn't that what you're supposed to hit? I mean, it's the biggest risk we have. Nuclear weapons, the power of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. You know, I rebuilt the entire military. Jets, everything. I built it, including nuclear, and I hated to build the nuclear, but I got to know firsthand the power of that stuff.
Ukraine is preparing to reveal its victory plan at a meeting with its allies in Germany later this month. On the 12th of October, President Zelensky says the plan will outline clear steps to ending the conflict with Russia after nearly 1,000 days of war. While the details are at this stage still private, some US officials have suggested it's a revised call for more military aid and long-range missile capabilities. The White House has expressed support, but concerns are still lingering about the lack of a thorough strategic framework. Brighter news and brighter skies. The Northern Lights could soon put on a dazzling display across the UK. Recent solar flares are expected to make the aurora borealis visible, with the best chances in Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. Tonight has the greatest likelihood of sightings, especially late between 11 o'clock tonight and midnight. Experts are advising finding dark skies and looking north to maximise your chances, as those intense solar activities could push the lights further south. Thousands of motorcyclists are revving their engines today as they gather for a heartfelt tribute. Riders from across the UK are converging at the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire for the annual Ride to the Wall. The event honours the names engraved on the Armed Forces Memorial, celebrating the bravery of those who served. Since 2008, motorcyclists of all ages have joined the unique pilgrimage, and our reporter Jack Carson is there with them.
Well, 8,000 riders are gathering here at the National Memorial Arboretum today to pay their respects, to pay tribute and deliver an act of remembrance for thousands of those who sacrificed everything for their country. And this year being particularly poignant, as many of those who have ridden here on the bikes around us may well have served in that campaign in Afghanistan, which is 10 years ago this year. So many of those names that we will be looking at on the wall will have a personal connection to the people that have ridden here on these bikes. And it raises money for the National Memorial Arboretum and that charity, with more than £1 million raised in those 16 years.
Jack Carson there for us at that memorial. Well, from just 13 runners to now millions, Parkrun is marking its 20th anniversary today. The global running movement, which began with just a handful of people in London in 2004, now spans over 2,500 locations in more than 20 countries. Founder Paul Sinton-Hewitt, who started the 5K events to aid his recovery from injury, says Parkrun has now grown into a force for good for both physical and mental health. It's now recommended by thousands of GP surgeries. The weekly events have registered over 10 million people. And I have just heard, in fact, from our very own competitive Dawn, that not only can she run a marathon in 4 hours, she thinks she can run the 5K in under 4 minutes.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sam. And I just let you into a little secret. Sam is so keen on running and his fitness, he often turns up for work in his shorts. So behind that desk looks very smart on top, but you don't want to see what's going on underneath. In any case, just a little trade secret there for you. OK, let's get on to today's stories, shall we? And Sam is now frowning at me, actually smiling. But I just want to read some of your messages, because a lot of you are really, really angry about the marches going on in London. And David, you are summing up what a lot of people are saying. You say you are surprised not to see Starmer, Lammy and Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, waving flags at the front of this march. They are all cowards. Meanwhile, Patricia says all the business in London need to get together and sue the mayor and the Metropolitan Police. It's unacceptable. They can't run their business without these terrorist sympathisers blocking the roads and causing chaos to their business. And we are indeed heading back into central London now, where tens of thousands of pro-Palestinian activists are gathering in Russell Square. There you can see that's live pictures coming to you from the centre of London today. They've blocked Tottenham Court Road and Gower Street near the British Museum. And it seems very peaceful so far. You can see the banners there seem to be sticking within the rules of, you know, some of them we've seen in the past have been quite hateful, aren't they? But we will wait to see. These marches normally and protests normally get worse as the day goes on and darkness falls. But let's see what my panel make of what's going on in London today. I have political commentator Kai Wilshaw and broadcaster Mike Parry. I'm going to come to you first on this one, Mike. This is, I've lost count now of how many marches we have seen in London. Yeah. It's costing the taxpayer millions of pounds. The police, not a lot in evidence there, but the police are spending their time doing that rather than, you know, stopping criminals, being criminals in the city. What do you make? Is it time, surely, we stop these marches?
Well, the marches seem to have gone away a bit to me. I haven't been reading about them for the past, I don't know, couple of months. Is it any coincidence that this gathering is taking place 2 days before the anniversary of the worst slaughter of Jewish people since the Second World War, October the 8th, right? Is it just a coincidence? Or are they now coming out and glorifying, in my view, you know, this horrendous massacre on October the 8th that we all know about? And I think it's...
October the 7th.
Eh?
It was October the 7th.
October the 7th, was it? Thank you very much.
No worries.
I find it appalling. Now, every citizen in this country deserves equal access to all the facilities we have in this country. So if 99.9% of us are now prevented from using the King's Highway by 0.1% who are out protesting, your earlier guest in the last hour said this is not a march because it has not been officially called and the police haven't been informed about it. And I, understand that that is actually the case. So this is actually a mass gathering to close down parts of London. Surely that's against the law, but of course we haven't got enough police resources to wade in there and say you're all going to get arrested unless you go home because there's so many of them. Just coming to the studio today, I come on London Transport, the Tube and all that, and there are legions of people there. What amazes me, or the impression I get about them is, they are all so entitled to believe that what they're doing is right when it's inconveniencing everybody else in the areas where they decide to make their protest. And again, I say, it can't possibly be a coincidence that in 2 days' time, we have the anniversary of one of the worst massacres since the Second World War.
Just to clarify, they did get permission for the march. It was the fact that they were blockading the roads outside that particular bank in Tottenham Court Road. Kai.
What else has changed? It's not a coincidence. What isn't a coincidence is the fact that Israel's stepping up its campaign in Lebanon and is risking, the whole region is risking an all-out war. We've got US Navy ships massing in the Gulf. Yeah. We've got Iran sending ballistic missiles into Israel. That's why they're protesting. And it is an important cause, and they have a right to protest, but...
They're protesting that Iran are sending missiles into Israel. I don't think so.
No, they're protesting just the step-up in the campaign of the war, and we can be angry, of course, that all of this is happening. It's not Israel's fault that this is happening, but there is a developing humanitarian crisis at the minute, and that's what they're protesting. Now, just to get to the effectiveness, though, of the protest, because you've both talked about this. I mean, for God's sake, you're completely right that we have lost count now of how many of these protests have been happening. And the reason that nothing is changing, in my view, is that it's ineffective campaigning, it's ineffective activism. I completely believe they have the right to be out there marching. It's incredibly inconvenient, I agree, but inconvenience doesn't come in the way of your basic human rights. And that's something that we enshrine in our democracies and should keep. And
but closing down parts of our society is wrong. It should not be allowed under any circumstances.
That should be allowed on any topic. But just what really gets me about this ineffective campaigning is that, where are the letter campaigns? Where is the proper, grassroots activism that we used to see in proper, political campaigns? I don't see it. Things like this targeting a Barclays just shows a lack of understanding about how the world works. Barclays has £1.5 trillion of assets under management. The idea that they're going to divest from, the various index trackers that, of course, invest in, say, legitimate arms manufacturers, some of which are based here in the UK, of course. I mean, it's ludicrous. And so shutting down streets in London in an ineffective mode of protesting, totally agree, but I still believe they have the right to try.
Yeah, I mean, Kemi Badenoch has talked, hasn't she, about the situation on integration in this country and how issues overseas, and she cited Leicester, right, as a city where disputes between groups who basically originate in foreign countries are now taking place in this country. This is very much happening today in London, and it's a huge issue that we've got to try and sort out about our liberty and about our freedom and about how much we allow people to bring those disputes to British streets, which impact on us all. Nobody can think it's right that that should happen.
OK, we are going to be discussing that later on as well, and we are going to move on now. We will be covering this protest as it develops during the day, so please don't go anywhere. We will bring it up to date as and when anything happens. But we move on to another story now. Outrage in the Cabinet today as Chancellor Rachel Reeves plans to cut £2 billion from the foreign aid budget. This is according to today's Daily Telegraph even. The Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, and other Cabinet members have voiced their concerns over the damage these cuts will do. As a Whitehall source says, the Chancellor will keep an iron grip on spending ahead of their October budget. But will the Cabinet backlash force her to reconsider? Joining me now is political author Owen Bennett to explain just how important it is for the UK to keep the foreign aid budgets. Owen.
Well, the foreign aid budget is an The foreign aid budget is an extension of diplomacy, isn't it? And it enables the UK to have a seat at the table in certain conversations. Now, the issue with the foreign aid budget, of course, David Cameron famously wanted it 0.7% of GDP. When he was in charge, that was moved back down to 0.5% amidst COVID. And Jeremy Hunt had actually pushed it back up again. If you look at the Labour Party manifesto, they said they wanted to take it back up to 0.7%, but only when it was fiscally able to do so. So it gave themselves that wiggle room. And I think that what's happening here is that obviously the big topic everyone talks about is the pensioners' winter fuel allowance. It would be a very difficult sell politically to say we're in a fiscal position where we have to reduce the money going to certain pensioners, have to means test in that regard. But hey, we've got a bit more money to send abroad for the foreign aid budget. So I think this is a real political argument they're in here, as opposed to policy outcome.
I mean, as you and the commentator we had in the first hour of the show have said, it's not really a foreign aid budget. It's more of a foreign bribery or greasing of palms budget. I mean, and when you put that title on it, it's a lot less sympathetic. What would actually happen if I mean, it's 15.3 billion. What would actually happen if we did just stop it all, even for a couple of years, so we could sort out the problems we have at home financially, you know, that black hole?
Well, I don't think that stopping it would sort out the problems at home. It's not a significant enough amount of money to be able to do all the things that a government would want to do. And what it would do is it would add to the notion that was put forward by Brexit. I'm not taking a view on Brexit here, but I'm saying it was put forward by Brexit that somehow the UK was shrinking from the world stage. This money enables the UK to stay in conversations with other countries, to have more influence, to be able to engage a bit more when it comes to, for example, business development and those kind of things, and perhaps have more conversations around border control. And it's all those kind of debates that you want to be part of. And this money, if you're looking at it purely in a cynical term, enables you to be part of those conversations and have slightly more gravitas than if you don't.
A lot of our viewers are getting sort of like, you know, a bit concerned about the amount of money we are sending to countries like Afghanistan, £352 million to Afghanistan, which is a situation that seems to be deteriorating on a daily basis, certainly for the women and girls of that country. So where is this money actually going?
Well, some of the money, of course, doesn't actually leave this country. Some of the money is used to help with asylum seekers in this country, and that actually adds towards the foreign aid pot. So there's examples of it going to India, and India also having a space program that came up a couple of years ago. So I think it's easy to find examples of where you can say, well, this money's gone here. Is it really the best place to go? What would be interesting, actually, is if there was much more debate over that exactly. There seems to be this obsession with the figure, 0.7%, 0.5%. There needs to be actually, I think, a really decent conversation about what do we want this money to do, not just for the UK, but for the world, and where do we want it to go? Who do we want it to benefit? And I think that actually people get slightly obsessed with this figure of 0.7 or 0.5, and there's not enough conversation over what do we as a country want from this money? What do we think that the world would benefit more of us doing, of being engaged more with this money? So for me, that is where I think there is a deficit in this whole debate, is actually what is this money used for?
Indeed, a very important debate to be had. Political author Owen Bennett, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, Owen. OK, now for all the best analysis and opinion on that story and everything we're talking about today, please do go to our website, which is at gbnews.com. I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is GB News The Weekend, and there's loads more coming up on today's really packed show. Tory leadership hopeful Kemi Badenoch says not all cultures are equally valid. But is she right for a start? And she's got some very interesting backers that you might be surprised to hear about. All of that and much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. We'll see you very soon.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
My kingdom for a voice. Scientists have, I can't believe this story, scientists have incredibly recreated the voice of Richard III using both his skull shape and a knowledge of medieval speech patterns. Me neither. The result is that the king, who was famously killed at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485, would have spoken in English close to that of a man from modern-day Yorkshire or Somerset. Let's take a listen.
The sun shines with no less licht and splendour, nor does it suffer any diminution of its strength.
Let's discuss this further with Yvonne Morley-Chisholm, the voice coach behind the project, who spent 10 years researching how the monarch would have sounded. Yvonne, you can probably see from my face, I have no idea how this works. Can you enlighten me as to what all this is about?
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Dawn. So, yes, I had a mad idea 10 years ago. I normally work with actors where we have a recording of a historical person, and we do something called vocal profiling to train the actor who's going to be performing on stage or screen to move their tongue tip, their jaw, their lips, everything, and get behind the personality of who they're playing. We obviously have quite a lot of that missing from Richard. We don't have a recording of him, but I wondered how far we could go. And a key player in this has been and is Professor Caroline Wilkinson, who over a decade ago created his face, first of all, from his skull. Now, on the day we, as Shakespeare would say, shuffle off our mortal coil, every little dent and dimple in the bones says how fit and strong the muscles were. So I thought, OK, we know what his face could do.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I think it's actually, quite brave of him, if that's the right word, to come out and back her. So let's see what my political panel make of this. I have commentator Kai Wilshaw and broadcaster Mike Parry with me. Coming to you first on this one, Kai. We all know Kemi Badenoch could start a fight in an empty room, to be honest with you. She can say some very incredibly divisive things. However, the thing she said about not all cultures are equal and we are importing some of the world's problems onto our doorstep that have nothing to do with life in this country. And Sir Trevor Phillips is saying she's got a point. What do you make of that?
Look, going into that article, I was incredibly sceptical. I've not seen very much from Kemi Badenoch's campaign to be the Tory leader. I've not seen very much to like, actually. Some of her throwaway comments in the past few weeks have caused concern from all sorts of different groups who wouldn't usually come together. But actually, reading this article, there is a lot to agree with and a lot that is quite reasonable. She actually advocates for more immigration, but the right kind of immigration. For a conversation about that, I think we can all agree on that. She says numbers matter, but culture matters more. And she's also talking about, and as Trevor Phillips says as well, the changes that the digital world have essentially brought into how you integrate into culture. And that I couldn't agree more with. There's a lot to like here. The problem is that, and I can get into sort of what I think, but integration is a really difficult topic because it's across government and also requires the buy-in of society to agree that we're all going to pull in on this. We all agree on having different people who have different skills from different parts of the world in the country, but then we need to bring them together. And I think one of the problems that has a number of different factors right at play here is what society are they coming to? What kind of society? Very different to a few decades ago. You know, the state of schools where kids get to grow up with different cultures and learning about different cultures and British culture is dismal, as we know. The social fabric in the UK is breaking. I used to go to church every Sunday, and we're quite a godless society now. Now, whether you get your community from church or from community centres, which have also pretty much been disbanded in many councils, community is important. And what we're seeing now, especially in young generations, is they don't spend time with people. They're lonelier than ever. They're not getting out there. And even if they got out there, the facilities aren't there for them to sort of commune with their peers in a way that isn't sort of dodgy and dangerous, right? And I think all of those things mean that integration is only going to get harder. Kids these days, I don't think, know how to socialise with each other. And so if we're going to make a positive argument for immigration, and I would, we do need to have an answer for what happens then. And I don't think any countries, especially in Europe, really have an answer for that at the minute.
Why do you think migrants to this country are not integrating, Mike?
Well, when I was a kid, growing up in Chester, if an Indian family bought a house in your street, everybody tried to move out. That's how bad it was in the 1960s, you see what I mean? So integration was not even something that was acceptable at a minimum level, right? Now, in this piece today, written by Sir Trevor Phillips, the size of individual migrant groups that make the great difference. Today, about 15% of the UK population is foreign-born. Another 23% are born to foreign parents. Therefore, it's become a huge issue. Now, the integration problem which I see is forced integration, because nobody who lives, for instance, in somewhere like Cornwall would suddenly like to see an influx of people from another culture which changed the culture of Cornwall and didn't include Cornish pasties or didn't include clotted cream or something like that. Do you see what I mean? And the sudden appearance of people from a different culture landing on your doorstep, so to speak, without a social programme to make sure the integration happens slowly, not quickly, is going to be a disaster for us all. We all know, I mean, I think you're from Cardiff, aren't you, Kai, or South Wales? Well, you know, I now live in London, and coming into London from Surrey, where I live, you see large suburbs of London which used to be full of London people, but which are now described as Little India, you know, or something like that, because they've been completely taken over by other cultures. Now, I'm not against that. What I'm against is people coming to this country and being told, oh, you should integrate into, you know, other parts of the country. If a great group of people from one culture wanted to settle in Bradford because of the clothing industry, or Leicester because industry's there, I say, if they've got families who want to come and join them, that's fine, because then they can live their lives within their own culture without upsetting anybody else.
Sorry, a lot of people are saying, so if I, for example, wanted to go and live in, say, Dubai or Saudi Arabia or Kuwait, I would have to abide by that culture. I wouldn't have the opportunity to go and drink and wander around wearing a mini, as a woman, drink and wearing a miniskirt, because that wouldn't be allowed. But in this country, we seem to let anything go, but we're still not getting the integration.
But those countries aren't tolerant liberal democracies, are they? I mean, we have some level of buy-in here. My question is, what's changed? Because immigrant communities massing in different areas has not been... It's not a new phenomenon. I live in Cardiff Bay at the minute. There's a Norwegian church right on the pierhead. Why? Because of the Norwegian timber shippers who used to congregate in that area, used to live, work...
But their culture's not that different to ours, Kai, to be honest, is it?
At that time, what, in the 1800s, I'd imagine I'd wager it was much more different than it is maybe now, right? You know, and Roald Dahl was baptised there. It's a wonderful sort of icon of integration. British Indians, you mentioned, I think we've seen in the decades since the 1960s that actually those cultures, the British culture and the Indian culture, fused together in the most amazing fashion. And now I don't think you'd ever have that kind of situation where an Indian family moves in and others move out, right? So what has changed? And I really think we need to recommit to creating a social fabric in this country where there are even opportunities to integrate. Because at the minute, what on earth are they integrating into? I don't know.
The point that both Kemi and Sir Trevor Phillips make is the fact that we are now increasingly importing conflicts from thousands of miles away onto our streets. And we see, you know, the riots in Leicester we saw in 2022. I mean, you know, that was Muslim-Hindu tensions in India, nothing to do with Leicester.
Yeah.
But we seem to be letting them happen.
But, well, you can't stop it. I'm sorry. If you accept that people can come to this country, let's all face it, it's all started with Windrush and that sort of era. We had to import people into this country. We had to get immigrants because the economy would have failed without them in the post-war years. But what we never did was to say, now, how do we accommodate the cultures these people bring with them? And unfortunately, the pendulum's gone the other way. I think we've turned a blind eye to other cultures establishing themselves in whichever way they want, which has extended to some small areas in this country ruled by Sharia law. Now, you know, that, in my opinion, is something that we should have clamped down upon, and we haven't.
We are running out of time very quickly. I just want to read this message out from Grumpy Brit. Some cultures don't want to integrate. They don't like British people and our cultures, and they come here for the social housing and the benefits. But I'm not sure about that. But just quickly, gentlemen, do you think it is true that some cultures do not want to integrate? They just want to carry on living the life?
Without a shadow of a doubt, because we know that there are some people here who've been here for 2 and 3 generations who still haven't bothered to learn English.
Yeah, Kai, just very quickly.
There are groups in society that don't integrate. I don't think that's specific to immigrants, though there are definitely patches of immigrant communities that don't integrate properly.
Right, OK, well, let me know what you think about that. Lots of getting messages, and I will get through to them, but there's so many coming in. Do please keep them coming in. gbnews.com/your say. What do you think? I mean, are there people coming to this country who don't want to integrate? They're not happy to integrate with our society. I'm Dawn Neeson, this is GB News, and there's loads more coming up on today's show. Today marks the annual celebration of cinema's most iconic MI6 agent, Bond, James Bond. But first, let's get the news with our very own Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. The top story from the newsroom just after 1:30, and we're now hearing that police are attempting to remove pro-Palestine protesters who have, in the last hour, flooded into Russell Square in London for a major demonstration marking the anniversary of the 7th of October attacks in Israel. Hundreds more protesters have already blocked Tottenham Court Road, while earlier around 1,000 more marched from Bedford Square, targeting companies like Barclays and the British Museum. One sign we saw read, and I quote, "Shame on those who looked away from the sadistic genocide of children in Gaza." That's just one of the posters among many being held by demonstrators. The demonstration, the Metropolitan Police say, is under a heavy officer presence, with one man arrested already for assaulting an emergency worker. And the Metropolitan Police have also said that man who was arrested, was stopped trying to break through a cordon meant to contain the crowd. Any more details on that developing story we will, of course, bring to you. Turning to news from France, French media reports are emerging that at least 4 deaths, including a child, have taken place in the English Channel. French media reveals the child under the age of 4 was reportedly trampled to death in a boat off the coast of Boulogne. And in a separate incident, 3 other migrants lost their lives after their small boat encountered difficulties near Calais. It means that this year alone, 51 people have now died in Channel crossings, marking the highest total since 2019. We expect to hear from a local official addressing the media in Calais later today. In other news, Boris Johnson is planning to release his memoir next week, titled Unleashed. I think that's correct. Yes, Unleashed. In a sit-down with Camilla Tominey on GB News, the former Prime Minister warned it would be a disaster if Sir Keir Starmer tries to reverse Brexit. He also reaffirmed his belief in Brexit, claiming it's given the UK the freedom to act more decisively. Here's what he had to say.
What do you think Starmer and Reeves are trying to reverse Brexit?
So if we'd been a rules... This is the key point. If we... Yeah, of course they are. Now, if we'd been a rules taker...
Yes.
At the end of 2020, 2021, we would not have been able to authorise AstraZeneca and Pfizer. Agree. No, but you keep interrupting this, because it's very, very important. And that was how, by March 2021, we had vaccinated 45% of the UK population.
The vaccine programme
compared to
will always
10%.
Be part of your legacy.
And you can, of course, catch the full hour-long interview with Camilla Tominey and Boris Johnson right here on GB News tomorrow from 9:30, or again later in the evening. A family in Lancashire say they are heartbroken after police mistakenly euthanised their XL bully dog. Lancashire police admitted the error, saying the dog, named Bruno, was put down due to an administration mistake, while his owners were seeking an exemption to keep him. The force have now issued an unreserved apology and vowed to change its processes to prevent it from happening again. A local MP in the area is calling for answers, describing the incident as a never event that shouldn't have occurred. The family is now demanding more transparency on how the police will ensure that it doesn't happen ever again. And finally, some brighter news and brighter skies. The Northern Lights could soon put on a dazzling display across the UK. Recent solar flares are expected to make the aurora borealis visible, with the best chances in Scotland, Northern Ireland and in northern England. Tonight has the greatest likelihood of getting a special sighting, especially late between 11 o'clock and midnight tonight. Experts are advising you find dark skies and take a look north to maximise the chance of catching the intense solar activity that could push the lights even further south. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you at 2 o'clock for a full roundup.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Plenty of sunny spells around this evening, but it will be turning a little bit cloudier as we go through Sunday, with some spells of rain. So the settled weather is all to do with the area of higher pressure out towards the east, but further towards the west we have got some frontal systems, especially across Northern Ireland, and here it's going to be a gloomy afternoon with outbreaks of heavy rain, especially towards the west. Drier for parts of Scotland, but across the north and the west we have outbreaks of rain. Otherwise, a largely fine and settled afternoon across England and Wales, with plenty of autumnal sunshine, highs of up to 17 or 18 degrees. Now, as we go through this evening, cloud and rain persisting across the Western Isles and across Orkney and Shetland as we go through the night. But further towards the east, we will see some early evening sunshine, dry here. But as we go across Northern Ireland, cloudy conditions remain, still with some patchy outbreaks of rain. Across much of England and into Wales, a largely dry evening to start, but further towards the west, we have got heavy spells of rain and some strong gusty winds, especially across Devon and Cornwall, as that pushes its way further towards the north and east, but it will start fizzling out as it does so overnight. Cloud will be increasing for many of us. There will still be some clear spells, and where you see the clear spells, we may even see the northern lights towards the far north. Otherwise, a breezy night to come. That will keep temperatures up at around 10 or 11 degrees. So as we start Sunday morning, there will be some brightness, especially across parts of East Anglia, but cloud will start to filter in, so turning a little bit murky into the afternoon with outbreaks of rain and drizzle. Further towards the west, some heavy, thundery rain pushing across Northern Ireland, parts of Wales and into the southwest England, highs of 17 to 18 degrees.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, this Sunday when I interview one of the most significant political figures of our era, Boris Johnson. Nothing will be off limits as we discuss his autobiography, Unleashed, and everything in it.
I failed to avert Megxit, but I did deliver Brexit. And I'm very, very happy to be on Camilla Tominey's show, Boris Johnson on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. and again at 6 p.m.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome to the weekend with me, Dawn Newsom. So, shall we lighten the mood a little bit now? It is indeed the weekend. It's a Saturday afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciating your company. And the name is indeed Newsom, Dawn Newsom. Yes, you know where we're going with this. I'm sorry, I don't write this script. But That is the only pun. Actually, I'm not going to promise that because anything's possible. If you haven't already guessed, it's James Bond Day. The first ever Bond epic, Dr. No, premiered in London 62 years ago today. It starred Sean Connery as the iconic secret agent and was based on the 1958 novel of the same name by Ian Fleming. The 5th of October now marks the annual celebration of cinema's most beloved MI6 agent. OK, I think we've got our guest ready to go. We don't have the same technology as Bond does, but the host of the Really 007 podcast, Matthew Pickup. Matthew, are you there for us?
I am indeed. I am indeed. Hello.
Excellent. Hello, Matthew. Thank you very much for joining us. Right, OK, Bond, one of the most iconic movie figures of all time. Why is it so important? Why is Bond so important to us?
I think across the world he's really important, but particularly here in Britain, he rings true with what it is to be a British person, and he has such elegance and you know, the films have been so popular and so exciting that they've captured the imagination of millions of people across the world. So I think he has a special place in so many people's hearts.
And yeah, I mean, it's been obviously 62 years since the first film, and we're all now still talking about who's going to be the next Bond. Or, by the way, who do you think should be the next Bond?
Who do I think? I would always say Henry Cavill, but I think Aaron Taylor-Johnson is the odds-on favourite at the moment.
Ah, yes, he's quite fit as well, isn't he? OK, so what, I mean, it's sort of, you know, there is a slight backlash, it has to be said now, that Bond is a bit misogynistic and a bit too sort of like not PC. What would you say to that argument, Matthew? Does he need to be woke?
Well, I would steer clear from saying you know, anything in terms of him being woke or not woke or anything like that. But obviously, you have to bear in mind the audience that you're appealing to and what modern audiences might be used to and might be more keen on than previously. But you also have to stay true to a literary and film character that has been, you know, alive and in people's lives for so many years. So it's finding that right balance, I think.
And for you, I mean, obviously, you know, you do the podcast, you're an expert on this. Who do you think has been the best Bond?
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight, every night from 11 p.m.
Some controversial film news. Someone has hired an actor who's white. What the hell is going on?
Let me just fix my hair. Let me just come away. So, Wuthering Heights film stirs controversy after white actor, he's white, chosen to play Heathcliff.
Is that your Humza Yusuf impersonator?
That is, yes, that's my Chinese accent. Experts have gone, oh no, there's a lot of, in recent years, he's definitely black or mixed race because he was found in Liverpool. And as you know, everybody in Liverpool is black or mixed race.
No, I mean, have you read the novel?
God, no.
Right, well, I have. And the novel itself does say, quite explicitly, that he is dark-skinned. Yeah. That the implication is that he's of Romani origin. So he wouldn't be whiter than white, you know. So, I mean...
No, that's fine. Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that casting... But on the other hand...
This guy's Spanish. His origin's Spanish.
Do you remember when there was a black Anne Boleyn for a Channel 5 miniseries? That seems to be more egregious, because I tell you what, Anne Boleyn definitely wasn't black.
You racist. No, I almost feel sorry in this story because you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't now. Because if they'd have, like, it's not like he's a bit of an anti-hero, right? It's not like a good all-round.
He's not a good guy.
So if you go, right, we definitely need to cast someone black for this. What? Why are you picking just black people to play someone with so many character flaws? Or you go, why?
Like they did with Darth Vader.
Yes, that's right.
He was played by the Green Cross Code Man. Okay. Just the voice was done by...
That's true. Yeah. Yes, it was the Green Cross Code Man. I wonder what they were saying there.
Have you ever seen the videos of the original audio of Star Wars?
No.
So you've got... I can't remember his name, but you've got the Green Cross Code Man going like, I find your lack of faith disturbing. Yeah. No, Luke, I am your father.
They should have left it as it was.
This is the difference to me. We're talking about Star Wars. You're like, oh, have you read Bronte, Wuthering, whatever?
She only wrote one novel, Josh. You could... do with the courtesy of reading it.
I'll read it straight after I finish your one.
And it's actually brilliant.
The People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Oh, there you are. Right, sorry about that. We had a James Bond villain get into the system. I believe our Matthew Pickup is still with us. He's the author of the podcast, the Bond podcast, and it's 62 years since the first. Matthew, thankfully, you are still there. Matthew, I was just going to say to you, who is your iconic Bond?
Yeah, so I think each of them have brought something brilliant to the role, but I think you can't look past Sean Connery. He was so good in that role for the first few films, and without him, I don't think there would be a franchise that we're still talking about today. So he was perfect for the role, and still is the one that everyone looks to.
And I'm going to ask you, don't have to say, but you can tell me quietly, who is your least favourite?
I've struggled a little bit with the more recent ones, with Daniel Craig's films and everything. But even he brought some great things to the role, and for many people, that for younger audiences in particular, he's their Bond. So I'm not going to diss him too much.
OK, brilliant. And if you were a Bond villain, I'm going to ask this question to our panel as well. What would your Bond villain name be?
That's a very interesting question. Let me think. Professor Kill, let's say something like that.
It says what it does on the tin, I guess.
Yeah, it does. Although there was a character called Mr. Kill in Die Another Day, so I might have to give this a rethink, I think.
Brilliant. Matthew, thank you very much for joining us, and we're sorry about the little Bond villain technical glitch we had there. Thank you very much for joining us. That's host of the Really 007 podcast. OK, I still have Kai Wilshot and Mike Parry with me now. I'm going to ask the same question to you. OK, first of all, gentlemen, coming to you first, Mike. Who is your favourite Bond?
Well, I totally agree with our expert there that once Sean Connery had set the mould, it was very difficult to move on. But I think that Roger Moore played him a very close second. And the reason for that is that Roger Moore had a twinkle in his eye, and he delivered the funny quips so eloquently. And you asked the question, who was the worst? The worst, in my view, is Daniel Craig.
Oh.
Daniel Craig took it so seriously, it's almost as though he hated the image of Bond as a womaniser and a man who could deliver a funny quip and all that. Took it so damn seriously, but I don't blame Daniel Craig. The people who were producing the Bond films suddenly decided, we've got to get serious, we've got to get into the new world, and they were up against the Bourne films. And the Bourne films, if you remember, were brilliant. What was the name of the guy who played Bourne? Matthew something. You know his name, Matt somebody or something like that. But anyway, they took the whole world of espionage to a new level.
Matt Damon, was it?
Matt Damon, thank you very much. They took the whole world of espionage to a new level, and all of a sudden, Daniel Craig had to try and meet them. But Daniel Craig, to me, seemed to be a psychotic nutter who was, battling with the role of being 007.
OK, right. And Kai, quickly, favourite Bond?
Look, I was born in 1994, so when I was 11, Daniel Craig was announced. And so I grew up with my dad, with my family.
You missed so much.
I knew you'd hate it. But look, what a few films he's had. And he wasn't the favourite at all. He's tried his best.
Yeah.
Now, what I want to know on Bond Day is, who the hell is next? Well, because I've been waiting and waiting.
I totally agree.
I have a lot of thoughts on some of the candidates, and I think it's about time that Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson gave us an answer.
I totally agree, and I think it should be James Norton. I think James Norton is such a great British actor, a flashing smile, great British accent. To me, he would be the perfect replacement.
And played a villain in McMafia, which is one of his
McMafia, and also, do you remember him in Happy Valley when he was a thug?
I recently binged it, yes.
OK, talking of villains, should we move seamlessly on there to outrage in the Cabinet today? We didn't have time. The reason I'm coming back to it is we didn't have time to talk about it with the panel earlier on. Chancellor Rachel Reeves plans to cut £2 billion from the foreign aid budget. This is according to the Telegraph. And both Mike and Kai were gagging to have a say on this. So, Kai, I mean, Should we cut foreign aid budget? I mean, it's not foreign aid, is it? It's foreign bribery, basically.
I disagree with that, and I don't think we should be cutting it. Look, I'm going to be very consistent here, because I think I was on this show criticising when Sunak vetoed or watered down the promise made by Lord Cameron, the former Foreign Secretary and Prime Minister, when they decided to cut down the level of foreign aid. And now, actually, this goes from bad to worse. If these plans by Rachel Reeves are passed and go through, which I think is quite unlikely, actually, we'll be at a 17-year low. And I know that she needs an iron grip on spending, black hole this, blah, 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 but really I think this is an abdication of a moral and historical duty. You know, in the 1970s, the world came together after the devastation of the Second World War, created these new institutions and decided that there should be some level of the aid distributed across the world. We were the architects of that, and I think to leave it now, it just cements our decline into what essentially is a non-entity, middle-income country.
Sorry, the 15.3 billion is foreign aid. That'd keep an awful lot of pensioners warm this year, wouldn't it?
Look, I'm not totally against foreign aid. I'm against where the foreign aid goes. And I think there are countries in the world now we could really help who need help. We're not helping. Why do we need to help India and China? I mean, for goodness sake, China's the second biggest economy in the world. India's got its own space programme. Money goes to Afghanistan, where the rights of women have now been so battered down, they're not even allowed to leave their own homes. They have to wear a full jihad, they're not allowed to speak. And why are we giving money to regimes like that? I don't agree that it's greasing people's palms. I think we're seen as mugs for giving all this money away. The other thing is, sorry, just an adjunct to this is, what a confused foreign policy Labour have got. What a confused policy they've got. Rachel Reeves is taking money off pensioners, right, which I totally disagree with, which seems a very odd decision to me, and now saying, but don't worry, I'm getting tough in the other direction, I'm taking $2 billion off the foreign aid. It doesn't seem to me to be a joined-up government policy on where money goes.
Money has to come from somewhere. There is a black hole, evidently. You might have heard them talking about it. We are running out of time, but thank you both very much, Kai Wilshaw and Mike Parry, for joining me this hour. And, Bond villains, keep gbnews.com/your say. There's loads more coming up on today's show, including live coverage of that Palestinian march going through London. But first, let's get the weather for you with Catherine.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Looking ahead into Sunday, it's going to be turning cloudier with spells of rain and then showery as we go into the new week. But largely settled conditions out there through this afternoon as higher pressure is situated towards the east. Further towards the west, low pressure and frontal systems across Northern Ireland, that bringing some heavy spells of rain towards the west, but also across the West Country this evening, some heavy spells of rain across Devon and Cornwall. As that moves its way towards the north and east, generally fizzling out as it does so, but bringing increasing amounts of cloud across the UK. There may be some clear spells to see the northern lights towards the north, but otherwise temperatures generally mild at around 10 or 11 degrees. Now, as we go through Sunday morning, some clear skies to start the day, especially across northern parts of Scotland. So here, a bright start to the morning. Further towards the west, largely cloudy with outbreaks of rain. And across Northern Ireland, some patchy outbreaks of rain that could be quite heavy at times. Cloudy conditions across the northwest of England. But the best of the sunshine will really be focused across East Anglia as we start Sunday morning. But it won't last too long as the cloud will increase from the west, bringing in some outbreaks of rain and drizzle across much of the country through Sunday morning and into the afternoon. Further towards the west, we have a heavy band of thundery, showery rain pushing across Northern Ireland into South Wales and the West Country too. But generally, temperatures still holding up at around 17 or 18 degrees. So similar to today, but perhaps just a bit of a different feel given the cloudier conditions. Now, as we go through Sunday evening, that band of rain will continue to push its way north and eastwards, affecting much of northern England. But as we go into Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday, it really is a case of sunny spells and scattered showers with highs of 17 to 18 degrees. Bye-bye.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss my big opinion. Mark Meets and my take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about.
Join me and my A-team of top pundits.
Chemistry tonight is electric.
As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon. It's 2 o'clock on Saturday, the 5th of October. Already, I know, nearly Halloween. This is the weekend on GB News. Now, live pictures here from central London where pro-Palestine activists block Tottenham Court Road and Gower Street, main roads through the city if you're not familiar with it. Organisers say they plan to target companies and institutions they say are complicit in Israel's war crime. We are live on the ground covering that march for you, and as you can see from those pictures there, peaceful so far, distinct like a police presence, I would say, but the march is at least moving now and not blocking that particular area where they started. And there is outrage in the Cabinet as it's been revealed the Chancellor plans to cut £2 billion from the foreign aid budget. Could the government face another backbench rebellion already? That honeymoon period over. And the Prime Minister has defended giving the UK control of the Chagos Islands as the decision has descended into a political blame game and fears of more overseas territorial losses. I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is The Weekend. Now, lots of you have been already getting in touch throughout the show, in particular about the march that's taking place in London today. And I promise I will get through reading as many as I can this hour. So please do keep them coming. It's gbnews.com/your say. Let me know your thoughts on certainly the march that's going on and anything you want to talk about Saturday afternoon. Why not? So let's have a good old gossip, and you can join the conversation whenever you need. OK, keeping me company this hour is former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire and former UKIP leader Henry Bolton. Thank you very much for joining me on your Saturday afternoon. But before we get into today's stories, Sam France just run into the studio to give you those news headlines.
Dawn, thank you very much indeed, and good afternoon to you. It's just after 2 o'clock. We will start by returning to that news coming to us from central London this hour. The police are now attempting to remove pro-Palestinian protesters who have flooded into Russell Square in the capital for a major demonstration, marking, of course, the anniversary of the 7th of October attacks in Israel. Live pictures here for you as hundreds more have already been blocking Tottenham Court Road, while earlier around 1,000 were seen marching from Bedford Square, targeting, as Dawn mentioned, companies like Barclays and the British Museum. We saw one sign reading, and I quote, "Shame on those who looked away from the sadistic genocide of children in Gaza. The demonstration is, they say, under heavy police presence, with now 2 people arrested, one for assaulting an emergency worker. The Met Police saying the second for trying to break through a cordon meant to contain the crowd. Any more details coming to us from those protests in central London, we will, of course, keep across for you and bring to you here on GB News. Several people, including a child, have died in 2 small boat incidents off the coast of France. The French Interior Minister confirmed on social media in the last few minutes that rescue operations are, he says, ongoing. French media reveals the child under the age of 4 was trampled to death in a boat off the coast of Boulogne. In a separate incident, 3 other migrants lost their lives after their small boat encountered difficulties near Calais. It means that this year alone, 51 people have now died in channel crossings, marking the highest death toll since 2019. We're also expecting to hear from a local official in Calais addressing the media later today. Turning to news in the Middle East, where British nationals are still fleeing Lebanon, with a final 4th flight set for Sunday amid the escalating conflict across the region. Over 250 people have already evacuated back to the UK on government-chartered flights, with Foreign Secretary David Lammy warning others to register now, as he says future flights aren't guaranteed. It comes as Israel is intensifying its airstrikes, hitting Beirut and Hezbollah targets, while Hezbollah, in response, has fired 100 rockets into Israeli territory. Meanwhile, the UK has sent £10 million in aid to Lebanon and posted troops in Cyprus in case of an emergency military-led evacuation. And we're also just hearing in the last few minutes that Hezbollah has reportedly lost contact with a possible successor to the recently assassinated leader Hassan Nasrallah. Hashem Safadine was targeted in an Israeli airstrike. And as I say, at this stage, Lebanese officials saying that the Hezbollah militant group have lost contact with him. And that was the breaking news that we've just been bringing you there from the Hezbollah spokespeople saying that they have lost contact with a possible successor to their assassinated leader. Meanwhile, in the US, Donald Trump is urging Israel to strike Iran's nuclear facilities after Iran launched ballistic missiles in response to Israeli action in Lebanon. Speaking at a campaign event, Trump criticised President Biden's more restrained approach, saying Israel should prioritise hitting nuclear sites. The former president called Iran's nuclear threat the biggest risk and argued that Biden's refusal to support strikes was a mistake.
They asked him, what do you think about Iran? Would you hit Iran? And he goes, as long as they don't hit the nuclear stuff. That's the thing you want to hit, right? I said, I think he's got that one wrong. Isn't that what you're supposed to hit? I mean, it's the biggest risk we have. Nuclear weapons, the power of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. You know, I rebuilt the entire military, jets, everything. I built it, including nuclear, and I hated to build the nuclear, but I got to know firsthand the power of that stuff.
Ukraine is preparing to reveal its victory plan at a meeting coming up on the 12th of July in Germany. 12th of October, rather. President Zelensky says the plan will outline clear steps to ending the conflict with Russia after nearly 1,000 days of war. While the details are at this stage still private, US officials suggest it's a revised call for more military aid and long-range missile capabilities. Meanwhile, the White House has expressed its support, but it comes as concerns still lingering about the lack of a thorough and strategic framework. Boris Johnson is gearing up to release his new memoir titled Unleashed, set to come out next week. And in a sit-down with Camilla Tominey here on GB News, the former Prime Minister warned it would be, he said, a disaster if Sir Keir Starmer tries to reverse Brexit. Boris Johnson also reaffirmed his belief in Brexit, claiming it's given the UK the freedom to act more decisively. And as for the future, well, he insists Brexit offers the chance to do things better. Take a listen to what he had to say.
What do you think Starmer and Reeves are trying to reverse Brexit?
So if we'd been a rules... This is the key point. If we... Yeah, of course they are. Now, if we'd been a rules taker...
Yes.
At the end of 2020, 2021, we would not have been able to authorise AstraZeneca and Pfizer.
Agree.
No, but you keep interrupting this because it's very, very important. And that was how, by March 2021, we had vaccinated 45% of the UK population.
The vaccine programme
compared to
will always
10%.
be part of your legacy.
Boris Johnson there speaking to Camilla Tominey, and you can, of course, catch the full and hour-long interview here on GB News. That's tomorrow from 9:30 in the morning, or again in the evening if you miss it. Well, Argentina has vowed to take concrete action to reclaim the Falkland Islands after the UK relinquished control of the Chagos Islands. The South American nation claims Britain's decision paves the way for it to gain full sovereignty over the Falklands, which Buenos Aires calls the Malvinas. Our political correspondent Catherine Forster asked Sir Keir Starmer in Liverpool yesterday whether the deal signals a possible change in the UK's approach to other British overseas territories.
Argentina now saying they want the Falklands back. Can you guarantee that under Labour no other overseas territories of Britain will be signed away?
Look, the single most important thing was ensuring that we had a secure base, the joint US, in particular UK base. Hugely important to the US, hugely important to us. We've now secured that, and that is why you saw such warm words from the US yesterday.
A family in Lancashire say they are heartbroken after police mistakenly euthanised their XL bully dog. Lancashire police admitted the error, saying the dog named Bruno was put down due to an administration mistake while his owners were seeking an exemption to keep him. The force has now issued an apology, unreserved, they say, and vowed to change its processes to prevent it from happening again. A local MP in the area is calling for answers, describing the incident as a never event that shouldn't have ever occurred. The family is now demanding more transparency on how the police will make sure it doesn't happen again. Well, it wouldn't be a news bulletin without some weather news for you, and I can confirm Hurricane Kirk is expected to bring heavy rain and strong winds to the UK by midweek next week as it starts to sweep across the Atlantic. The Met Office is warning the storm's remnants could cause disruption across parts of England and Wales on Wednesday and Thursday. This week will see sunshine and showers, though, with highs of 18 degrees before Kirk's arrival. And the Northern Lights could soon put on a dazzling display across the UK. Recent solar flares are expected to make the Aurora Borealis visible, with the best chances in Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. Saturday night tonight has the greatest likelihood of sightings, especially late between 11 o'clock and midnight. Experts are advising that you find dark skies and look north to maximise the chance of catching the intense solar activity. And finally, thousands of motorcyclists are revving their engines as they gather for a heartfelt tribute. Riders from across the UK are convening at the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire for their annual Ride to the Wall. The event honours the names engraved on the Armed Forces Memorial, celebrating the bravery of those who served. Our reporter Jack Carson is with them.
Well, 8,000 riders are gathering here at the National Memorial Arboretum today to pay their respects, to pay tribute and deliver an act of remembrance for thousands of those who sacrificed everything for their country. And this year being particularly poignant, as many of those who have ridden here on the bikes around us may well have served in that campaign in Afghanistan, which is 10 years ago this year. So many of those names that we will be looking at on the wall will have a personal connection to the people that have ridden here on these bikes. And it raises money for the National Memorial Arboretum and that charity, with more than £1 million raised in those 16 years.
That's it from me for now from the newsroom. We can now head back to Dawn after that slightly extended news bulletin as the James Bond villain continues to play games.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Oh dear, thank you very much, Sam. OK, this is Dawn Neeson, this is GB News, and I hope you're having a wonderful Saturday afternoon out there. This is indeed the weekend. See what we did there with the title? Clever, isn't it? Now, the sun is setting on the British Empire as sovereignty of the Chagos Islands is to be handed to Mauritius. The fact they never had it in the first place is neither here nor there. But will other territories now follow? Argentina have promised to reclaim the Falkland Islands with concrete action, whatever that means. That's according to their foreign minister, while Sir Keir Starmer yesterday refused to rule out the returning of other British regions. So has the UK government given Argentina basically the green light to take back the Falklands? And then what about Gibraltar? And what about the Isle of Wight? I've always been worried about the Isle of Wight. I'm now joined by Falklands War veteran Major Chip Chapman. Chip, hello. Thank you very much for joining us, Chip. Really good to see you. Now, obviously, you are a Falklands veteran. Sir Keir Starmer yesterday refused to rule out. He was asked a question directly about the Falkland Islands and Argentina, once again sabre-rattling. He refused to answer a straightforward question. What do you make of what's happening with this?
Well, the process of negotiations on the Chagos Islands was such that it was said at the time that this doesn't read across to any other of the British overseas territories, neither Gibraltar terms, in the way that Chagos Islands wasn't, are deemed to be on the the UN decolonisation list. And there's a recognition that there's a dispute. The dispute, of course, is between Spain and Gibraltar. In the case of Gibraltar, I've just come back from lecturing there, and between Falklands, the Falklands or British, and the Argentinians. There's absolutely no chance that both of those will be given to them. Both have had referenda, which is the principle of self-determination. The Gibraltarians in 1968 and 2002, when they said that there's more chance of hell freezing over than Spain having sovereignty over Gibraltar. And the Falkland Islands had a referendum in 2013 when 99.8% of people voted to self-determination and to remain in the current status quo. So given that, and given that there were no inhabitants in the Chagos Islands, one of the dreadful parts of our history is that we got rid of them all in the early 70s. It just is not an issue. And in military terms, there is no capability from the Argentinians to go to military action. They neither have the amphibious capability nor the air capability. We have a resident garrison, and unlike 1982, we have the indicators and warnings that would give us the triggers if we needed to reinforce the islands at any time.
So, Chip, when our Prime Minister was asked this direct question, why didn't he just say pretty much what you have said? No, there's absolutely no chance. The Chagos Islands were a one-off. Why didn't he just say that?
Well, I think most politicians aren't experts on most things, so he's going to give a sort of vacillatory answer because they just don't know if they're going to be, criticised one way or the other. And that's why they're never largely definitive on these things and would kick the answer down the road to a time when they're properly briefed on it. If you're in any portfolio, and a Prime Minister has a very wide portfolio, he just doesn't know lots of things about things which he then has to answer questions on. There's a difference.
He's running the country, Chip.
He is, but it doesn't mean he knows everything about anything. I mean, I used to, every week, the BIOT, the British Indian Ocean Territories, used to come up on some of the videos that I used to do. It's something that I've known about for 40 years. He probably only heard about this last week. He just doesn't know the detail of these things, as most politicians don't.
You're not filling me with optimism here. But thank you for joining us. That's Major General Chip Chapman. Thank you very much on our Prime Minister not knowing what he's doing, not my words, and giving bits and pieces away. I've got my wonderful panel here, our former Labour advisor, Scarlett Maguire, and former UKIP leader, Henry Bolton. Henry, you have served. Chip was very polite there. I mean, if I'd have served, certainly in the Falklands, and was a Falklands veteran, I would regard our Prime Minister not saying, don't be stupid, of course we're not giving them back to Argentina, as a slap in the face. People died.
I think he should have been a lot clearer, and I think it is what General Chapman says is true, that most politicians do not know the history or the geography of many of the issues that they deal with. That's true, but that doesn't mean that it's OK. There is no way the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary should be making decisions about ceding sovereignty of a British overseas territory without being fully confident that they are fully versed in the history, the politics, the social side of it, the security side of it, and the geography.
Without Parliament even sitting, by the way.
Correct. And I think that's absolutely deliberate. And I've actually just I came to the studio from having a meeting with representatives of the Chagosians, both here in the UK and the Seychelles. They are, angry isn't the right word, highly upset, extremely disappointed. Major General Chip Chapman was talking about the principle of self-determination. They have not been given a vote. Now, they don't live there, he's quite right, but that's not their fault. It's because we removed them, I think, in 1965. It's not their fault. They were born under the British flag. They are citizens of a British overseas territory. As much as somebody from the Falklands is. The fact that they don't live there because we moved them out, because it's a military base there, and they haven't been able to return, doesn't, in my view, negate the principle of self-determination. The other thing about this is, what do they want? And they've asked me, with your permission, to tell you what they want.
Absolutely.
They want, firstly, to live under the protection of, quote, the Union Jack, under the protection of Great Britain. They want to remain a British overseas territory. They do not want to go to Mauritius. They are highly sceptical of Mauritius because, as they say, I mean, it's no coincidence, in my view, that I think 2 days ago the elections in Mauritius were announced. They'll take place in just about 1 month from now. And this is, we don't know how much money, but the British government has agreed to give the present government in Mauritius an undisclosed amount of money every year for 99 years, index-linked. Now, that's a pretty good election tool to go into the election with. So, and they're a socialist government. So, you know, there's all this, and they're highly sceptical of all this. They are very disappointed. And one final point, if I may, they've also asked me to let everybody know, viewers and everybody, that they are holding a protest outside the Palace of Westminster at 12 o'clock on Monday. And please, anybody and everybody who is in sympathy with their situation, please turn up. Okay. That's the message.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Henry. Scarlett, Boris Johnson, in his column today, just talking about the situation, says, I fear for the Falklands. Now, Starmer has been exposed as a spineless, lefty, surrenderist fraud.
I know. I've never heard such rubbish. Just to quickly do the Chagos Islands, which are completely different, as Chip Chapman said, from the Falklands, is we behaved abominably. We moved all these people off an island because we decided to do it, and then allowed or built a base with the Americans, which they're still not being allowed to go back to. And I do agree that I do think the Chagosians should have been allowed a say. But I mean, actually, what really happened is I heard Jonathan Powell being interviewed, who finally was the envoy that finally, I mean, after this government took over from the Conservatives, but he said all the hard work had been done by the Foreign Office, and basically he was just doing it. And it is appalling that we have not allowed those people to go back, and we are now going to allow. The Falklands, completely different. If anybody's been to the Falklands, they're British. Geographically, they might be much, much closer to Argentina. They might be, the other end of the world. But I was at school with Falklanders, right? They were all British. Many of them came. I mean, I think the Falklands' biggest problem must be keeping their young on the island, because there's not a lot going for me. But actually, the thought that Argentina genuinely can say, they might call them the Malvinas, these are no more Argentine than, Jersey or Guernsey.
As Henry said, the people of Chagos weren't asked about their fate. They were just sold to Mauritius. I mean, I know they don't live there. I know all those arguments. But they were just sold. They weren't even asked about this. As Henry quite said, they're quite rightly. So what's to say that we'll bother asking people?
Because it is completely different. So there is a whole thing about there was deal in the 60s between Mauritius and Britain that was not a good deal, right? That we basically gave the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, provided nobody lived there. We sent Chagos people to Mauritius. We took a lot of them back in Croydon, who Henry have been talking to. I absolutely agree. But that happened in the 60s. They are not there. And what the deal is to try and start sending them back, or allowing them to go back, not sending them. The thing about the Falklands is completely different. It is ridiculous. And the reason there was the Falklands War was because, and that's why Lord Carrington, who was Foreign Secretary at the time, had to resign, was because the signs had gone out that actually we didn't really care.
I get all of this. I get the past. I get the history. So why did our Prime Minister, when he was asked this question directly, not answer it? Quickly, we are running out of time.
That I really don't know. I mean, and it was the Conservatives who started this process, and it was James Cleverly who started this process, and I think it was an appalling... He didn't need to do it. It was an appeasement of whatever, and it was partly Liz Truss's fault.
He had been found guilty by, international courts and the UN, but apart from that...
I think that's irrelevant because it was based on proximity to Mauritius. That sets a precedence in terms of both Gibraltar and the Falklands, which I think was unnecessary to allow. And I think also, on the exactly the same basis that we are saying that we're the Foreign Secretary has said, returning the islands to Mauritius. Mauritius never had them. But on the same basis, Mauritius has exactly the same claim on the Seychelles. The whole thing is ridiculous. It's about money for the Mauritanian government.
Unfortunately, Henry, we have to move on now, but thank you for mentioning the plight of the Chagos
12 o'clock on Monday.
And their protests. Thank you very much for that. Now, for all the best analysis and opinion on that story and so much more, please do go to our website, which is gbnews.com. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News, and there's loads more coming up on today's very, very packed show, including your messages. There's outrage in the Cabinet. It's been revealed the Chancellor plans to cut £2 billion from the foreign aid budget. Could the government face another backbench rebellion already? All of that and much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. You've got time to put a quick capper on, but don't go too fast. See you soon.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
We are now delighted to be joined by comedian and my beautiful friend, Francine Lewis, who's here to share with us her upcoming book, The Last Laugh, and an exciting competition in collaboration with none other than that mean Simon Cowell. Francine,
he's not so mean anymore.
Oh, is he not?
He's not. And do you know what?
Having a child, is it maybe?
Definitely. It's really weird because I really liked Simon. He was nasty. I just found that, I don't know, quite sexy. Now he's way too nice. Way too nice.
That's what they say, isn't it? You get all the nice guys say, I never get any luck with women. And they always say I'm too nice.
Do you know what? The truth is, I've always thought Simon was lovely. He's such a nice guy. Like, when I was doing Britain's Got Talent, I was very, very excited, you know, to meet Simon again because it was the second time I'd actually met him. And I always thought he was such a charming, lovely man.
Of course, you are more recently well known for BGT and your impressions and whatnot.
Do you know what? I do watch a lot of reality TV, a lot of that sort of stuff.
What do you watch?
I love Towie, whenever Love Island's on. Seriously, honeys, 100% definitely. You got to watch Essie. It's all about Towie. Love it, seriously. So I'm always doing, you know, whatever the new reality shows are.
The favourite is Katie Price, and we've got a video. I think we've got a selfie video of us doing.
Have we?
Yeah, we have. From
I'm showing
years ago.
Tatiana to Katie Price, which she does amazingly. Come on, Tatiana, let's...
No, I don't.
Tatiana!
Katie, there's a mixture between Katie Price and Tatiana.
What do you think? I love when people take me off. It shows what a big star I am.
It's the lick of the lip.
The People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. The wonderful Henry has just been taking us on a guided tour of all the territories that Keir Starmer could give away if he knew what he was doing. But hey, who knows? This is the weekend indeed. Thank you very much for joining me, and I am indeed Dawn Neeson. Now, outrage in the Cabinet today as Chancellor Rachel Reeves plans to cut £2 billion from the foreign aid budget. And a lot of you are thinking this is a good thing. You are actually supporting Rachel Reeves. This is according to the Telegraph today, by the way. The Foreign Secretary David Lammy and other Cabinet members, however, have voiced their concerns over the cuts. And a Whitehall source says that the Chancellor will keep an iron grip on spending ahead of her October budget. You know, the really scary one. But will the Cabinet backlash force her to reconsider? They're fighting like cats in a sack already, aren't they? And we're 100 days in. Let's see what my panel makers, former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire and former UKIP leader Henry Bolton, who knows more about foreign territories than the Prime Minister, which isn't worrying because he's very intelligent. OK, so
I was going to say it's not difficult.
I think we agreed that he possibly doesn't know the names of every single one of the 47.
He could have just answered a question. Oh, no, he's a politician. Of course he can't answer a question. Right, should we talk about foreign aid? Now, a lot of people out there, and gbnews.com/your say, by the way. Eyes. Dawn, if you didn't talk so much, you would be able to read out messages you keep... I'm paid to talk, OK? I'm sorry. I'm paid to talk. OK, so, but in any case, foreign aid, 15.3 billion. That's the black hole, isn't it? Just for a bit, maybe a couple of years, Scarlett, should we just sort of stop the foreign aid, give it to the pensioners that are going to freeze to death this winter and fill that black hole just for a couple of years?
No, I mean, foreign aid's really... For a start, a lot of foreign aid is spent on Ukrainian refugees. They are considered foreign aid. All the refugees that come to this country are considered foreign aid. So a lot of the foreign aid budget is actually spent in this country. But also, I mean, it makes a whole difference. Things like working with other countries on vaccines. We're doing a lot of that at the moment. We're trying to work out how to deal with vaccines, how to distribute them, and when the foreign aid budget was cut, which it was cut,
yes, it was.
I mean, literally, health centres had to close. I mean, the foreign aid is... So it is soft power. It is a way of making sure we're at the table. But actually, it really does save lives.
Everyone keeps coming back to it. It's foreign aid, but it's also greasing a lot of palms, isn't it, Henry?
It is, actually. Not intentionally, though, I don't think, but that's the effect. I agree with Scarlett that you can't get rid of... Partly, there's a caveat. Partly. Look, the foreign aid budget, absolutely, there are a lot of things that it does that people are not aware of. So, for example, we are a member of a very important organisation that people won't have heard of, probably, the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe. We have to pay towards that organisation. There are things such as that absolutely we should be doing. A lot of the work that our embassies and consulates and so on do abroad is funded from this. Whereas, if you close the foreign aid budget, you're basically closing diplomatic activity.
Right.
So, but I do believe it can be cut, and I've got very good grounds for saying that, because I ran budgets from the international aid budgets in Afghanistan, across the Balkans, and in various other places. And I was horrified by the way some of it is managed. What happens often is that ambassadors, deputy heads of mission, others working out wherever they are, find that they can gain traction, and this is what Scarlett means by soft power, by saying, yes, we can contribute towards your whatever courses or refurbishment of your courts or whatever. The problem is that they are very often unaware that they are being suckered into local political power games and people's pockets. And I arrived in Afghanistan to find that we were providing certain district governors with $5,000 cash every month without any accountability, without any influence whatsoever. It was there to support them. Well, I was, I think, instrumental in putting an end to that. But I also did a review, a 3-day review, wasn't very long, with a couple of other people for the Foreign Office on why projects that were being funded from international aid were not delivering the intended effect. And the reason was very simple.
Go on.
The people in the embassies and in the diplomatic missions involved were not in any way project management trained. So they didn't even know how to structure a project. And so those projects there was money going in, but they weren't properly planned or managed, and therefore they didn't have the desired effect. So we were spending money without a beneficial outcome. Whatever your intention is, it's not going to happen. So I think there is, I agree with Rachel Reeves, it's the bottom line. It can be cut, but I think that we also need to improve the efficiency with which we spend it.
I absolutely agree about the efficiency, but what I've been interested in is people have been saying, and I think possibly you as well, you know, what are we doing giving aid to Afghanistan when it's run by the Taliban and it's appalling to them? But actually, what's going on in the sheer poverty and starvation that's going on in Afghanistan is dreadful. And Afghanistan is actually, I mean, what's so interesting about it is on the one hand, it is an appalling regime, no question about it.
But the problem is, Scott, we keep giving Afghanistan 352 million, just very quickly, 352 million, but it doesn't seem to be getting any better. It's getting worse.
And because the banking system there, sorry, Scarlett, doesn't work, doesn't function, I spent 2.5 years there, doesn't function, it's a cash economy. So basically, at some point in that process, between transferring those funds to Afghanistan and them, they turn into cash, and that cash is almost impossible to account for.
Oh, anyway, so I'm so sorry, Scarlett. We have to move on. I mean, it's a debate that we could carry on. Unfortunately, we haven't had time. I'm Dawn Neesman, this is GB News, and there's loads more coming up on today's very packed show, including your messages. Still in nappies. No, not me. Children across the UK are starting school many years behind their age because of the effect of lockdown. Or is there more to this than meets the eye? But first, let's get the news headlines with Katie Bowen.
Dawn, thank you, and good afternoon. It's just gone 2:30. I'm Katie Bowen in the GB newsroom. Police are attempting to remove pro-Palestine protesters who have flooded into Russell Square for a major demonstration marking the 7th of October attacks in Israel. Hundreds more have already blocked Tottenham Court Road, while earlier around 1,000 marched from Bedford Square, targeting companies like Barclays and the British Museum. There are now reports that pro-Palestine protesters have crossed paths with counter-demonstrators. The demonstration is under heavy police presence, with the Met Police saying 2 people have now been arrested on suspicion of assaulting an emergency worker. French media reports are emerging of at least 4 deaths, including a child in the English Channel. French media reveals the child, under the age of 4, was trampled to death in a boat off the coast of Boulogne. In a separate incident, 3 other migrants lost their lives after their small boat encountered difficulties near Calais. This year alone, 51 people have died in Channel crossings, marking the highest toll since 2019. A local official is set to address the media in Calais later today. Boris Johnson is gearing up to release his new memoir, Unleashed. In a sit-down interview with Camilla Tominey, the former Prime Minister warned it would be a disaster if Sir Keir Starmer tries to reverse Brexit. Johnson also reaffirmed his belief in Brexit, claiming it's given the UK the freedom to act more decisively. And as for the future, he insists Brexit offers the chance to do things better. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
What do you think Starmer and Reeves are trying to reverse Brexit?
So if we'd been a rules... This is the key point. Of course they are. Now, if we'd been a rules taker...
Yes.
At the end of 2020, 2021, we would not have been able to authorise AstraZeneca and Pfizer. No, but you keep interrupting this because it's very, very important. And that was how, by March 2021, we had vaccinated 45% of the UK population.
The vaccine programme
compared to
will always
10%.
be part of your legacy.
Well, you can watch the full hour-long interview with Camilla Tominey here on GB News tomorrow morning at 9:30. A family in Lancashire say they are heartbroken after police mistakenly euthanised their XL bully dog Bruno. Lancashire police admitted the error, saying Bruno was put down due to an administration mistake, while his owners were seeking an exemption to keep him. The force has issued an unreserved apology and vowed to change its processes to prevent it happening again. The family is demanding more transparency on how the police will ensure this does not happen again. And finally, the Northern Lights could put on a dazzling display across the UK. Recent solar flares are expected to make the Aurora Borealis visible, with the best chances in Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. Saturday night has the greatest likelihood of sightings, especially late on between 11 p.m. and midnight. Experts advise finding dark skies and looking north to maximise your chances, as intense solar activity could push the lights further south. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Katie Bowen. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Plenty of sunny spells around this evening, but it will be turning a little bit cloudier as we go through Sunday, with some spells of rain. So the settled weather is all to do with this area of higher pressure out towards the east, but further towards the west we have got some frontal systems, especially across Northern Ireland, and here it's going to be a gloomy afternoon with outbreaks of heavy rain, especially towards the west. Drier for parts of Scotland, but across the north and the west we have outbreaks of rain. Otherwise, a largely fine and settled afternoon across England and Wales, with plenty of autumnal sunshine, highs of up to 17 or 18 degrees. Now, as we go through this evening, cloud and rain persisting across the Western Isles and across Orkney and Shetland as we go through the night. But further towards the east, we will see some early evening sunshine, dry here. But as we go across Northern Ireland, cloudy conditions remain, still with some patchy outbreaks of rain. Across much of England and into Wales, a largely dry evening to start, but further towards the west, we have got heavy spells of rain and some strong gusty winds, especially across Devon and Cornwall, as that pushes its way further towards the north and east, but it will start fizzling out as it does so overnight. Cloud will be increasing for many of us. There will still be some clear spells, and where you see the clear spells, we may even see the northern lights towards the far north. Otherwise, a breezy night to come. That will keep temperatures up at around 10 or 11 degrees. So as we start Sunday morning, there will be some brightness, especially across parts of East Anglia, but cloud will start to filter in, so turning a little bit murky into the afternoon with outbreaks of rain and drizzle. Further towards the west, some heavy, thundery rain pushing across Northern Ireland, parts of Wales and into the southwest England, highs of 17 to 18 degrees.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Shush. Hello, welcome back to The Weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. And the panel are getting frisky already. God, honestly, expected better.
One of them is.
Right, OK. Now, I hope you're having a lovely weekend. It is indeed the weekend, and this is The Weekend. Now, this story is going to very annoy you. Children are said to be arriving at school still in nappies, unable to properly communicate with classmates. Education leaders have said that those who spend their early years in lockdowns are starting school with poor social and developmental skills, and have called for increased classroom support. Hello, Mum and Dad. Let's see what my panel make of this one, though you can't shut them up, to be honest with you. So let's go to you first on this one, Scarlett. Right, OK, we're blaming lockdown, right? Kids, it was appalling what we did to little kids in lockdown. It really was. I completely understand that. But parental responsibility?
Well,
anyone?
Also, the other thing is lockdown has been over for a bit.
Yeah, but these were little kids that...
No, but these were little kids. I mean, I just think that the blame game isn't going to help, and you just think, why? Why is this happening? And actually, was it happening before? Were kids being sent to school in nappies? I mean, I remember reading a piece in the Daily Mail. Read
the Daily Mail? I thought it was just The Guardian or nothing.
No, I do all the time. By a Daily Mail writer saying that she hadn't bothered to try. She didn't send her children to school in nappies, but she did have them still in nappies at night because, frankly, she couldn't be bothered. There's a whole problem about... so where do you pick up your skills, your social skills, your thing? I mean, so it's really easy to say, well, they've got terrible parents, but actually, the people who are suffering are the kids.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
If children are going to school in nappies, let alone the poor teachers, but children are going to school in nappies, so that they don't know how to talk. What is going on?
Yeah, Henry, what is going on? Why aren't parents talking to their children, whether it's in lockdown or otherwise?
There's a problem with the parents. Let me explain why I say that so bluntly. Listen, I don't care whether you're locked down or not. You want your child to know how to go to the toilet. And, if you are putting your child in nappies because you can't be bothered to teach them how to go to the toilet, then I'm afraid the problem rests with you. I don't like the idea that this is being blamed on lockdowns and so on. Social skills, how to talk to people, how to interact with people. Yes, it may be slightly limited because of a lockdown, which Scarlett says now is some years ago. The toilet training, and how to use a knife and fork, I'm sorry, that is down to the parents. Quite simply, if you don't like that, parents, then I'm sorry. If you're listening, that's the way of it. It's your fault.
But Henry, that isn't helping.
Well, no, but what will help? So I was just about to say, where we need to address this is probably in schools, because we need. I think there was a time when people were taught in schools everything from cooking to a little bit of financial self-management and so on. And I think if you are going to do sex education in a school, well, what about the consequences of sex? You need to look after the children that you produce. And if for some reason you don't know, then I think in that mix is this is what to expect, because it seems to me that a whole bunch of parents out there don't know anything about what to do with a child when it arrives.
How do we have a generation now of parents that don't actually know how to parent?
Or they're too lazy to.
I don't think we do have a generation. I think we have a few. I think there are lots and lots of very good parents out there. Some of whom are 20 and some of whom are 40, right? I think there are an awful lot of parents of young children, and remembering probably like Henry how tough it was, I have to say. The reason I toilet trained them was because I wanted them
to look after themselves. It is shocking how much work it is. It's great. But it is incredibly hard work, and I think it takes a lot of people by surprise, and they haven't made room in their life for it.
I think there are some sex educationists. I remember where people are sent home with a doll that cries if it's not given attention, to actually find out. How tough it is, but I think that That's fine, but I do think that what we have to do is we have to concentrate on the children, on the young children going to school, not knowing how to do anything, and actually putting an awful lot more work into and nurseries and that sort of thing.
I agree, but it's not for the schools to teach. I agree, we've got the problem. So, you know, the only place that we can intervene is at the schools, but then you're running the danger of becoming the nanny state. I think we've got a society that, generally speaking, although there are some most people are very good parents, we've got a society in which people grow up as children into adulthood, sitting on the sofa in air-conditioned rooms, playing computer games with their Netflix or whatever, and, you know, a child is an inconvenience in their life.
Okay,
well, in which case, don't have a child.
I'm going to play mummy now. I'm going to have to say thank you very much to both of you. We have run out of time. So, Scarlett Maguire, Henry Bolton, thank you both so much for joining me this Saturday afternoon. I'm Dawn Neeson, this is GB News. There's loads more coming up on today's show. It's showbiz time. Ulrika Johnson has revealed her secret alcohol battle and says she's self-medicated with drink. Intriguing, all of that and much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel, but you can pour yourself a stiff drink unless you're Ulrika Johnson, obviously. See you soon.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Right, up and down the country, many parents are preparing or have indeed already sent their child off to university.
Indeed, but sometimes it can leave parents struggling to cope with the, quote, empty nest syndrome their child leaves behind. So joining us now to discuss how to cope with sending off your sprogs to university, or not so sprogs, is broadcaster and psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. Good morning, Lucy. Nice to see you this early. This is a real thing, isn't it? It's our colleague Paul Coitz, our sports expert, describes it as grief, sending your young adults off to uni and leaving the nest for the first time.
Yes, I think grief is the right word because it's an ending. And it's not just an ending with your relationship with your child. It changes from here on in. But it also is very much about your identity. Your identity as a parent is weakening. You'll always be that child's parent, but you're not going to have the same involvement on a daily basis. And so you're left to think, OK, well, what does my life look like going forward? What's my relationship? If you're in a relationship with a partner, how is that going to change? And like all elements of grief, there's going to be a bit of a process. There's going to be that transition period where you adjust to your new life, just as your sprogs, as you call them, are adjusting to their new, exciting phase of their life.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. This is The Weekend. With me, Dawn Neeson, joining me now is the wonderful Steph Ketchy to go through showbiz. We got the green memo, Steph. Come on,
Green Serene, Ulrika Johnson.
Fancy a drink, love?
Oh, I fancy many drinks,
Exactly.
but I don't think Ulrika Johnson will be having none because in the front of the Sun today, Dawn, she's spoken about her secret battle with booze.
Okay.
She's kept this to herself for many, God knows, years, but she said she's been sober for the last 4 months. She says that she's been a high-functioning binge drinker, so she said she wouldn't be throwing up and whatever, but she suffered a lot of anxiety and she was using drink to quell her nerves.
Right.
She says that she had many blackouts and now she's come out in a bid to help other people realise that they're not alone in this. It's a bit hard because, you know, no two people are the same. When they've got a drink problem, you've got a drink problem. But I guess it's Ulrika's moment to talk about her battle that she's been going through.
And it is Sober October.
Yeah, it is Sober October. So, you know, she's came out with that at the right time. But I do hope for her that she can manage to stay on the straight and narrow.
Well, obviously, not to, you know, do alcoholism down.
Yeah.
It's horrific disease.
It is.
But it's only been 4 months.
Well, this is what I'm a bit worried about. You know, some people say if you're an alcoholic and you can even do an hour without a drink, it's an achievement. So it's an achievement in that sense. But for people who know about the up and down struggles of alcoholism, it's a bit too soon to talk about it. Most people or most celebrities I've seen in the past, they don't talk about it till they've got to the 2-3 year mark.
And even then.
Because, you know, you're kind of putting the attention out there and people are now going to be looking, if you do have a slip-up, what, are you going to come back to the papers again to talk about it? But I do wish her the best in her road to recovery. But as I said, no two alcoholics are the same.
Exactly.
So,
Tempting fate, and if you are struggling, please, AA are there for you.
Yes.
We will mention that. Where else do you want to go?
Nick Knowles, he is the most unluckiest man in showbiz at the moment. Last week,
he broken now?
He's hurt his knee, Dawn. He's not going to be in today's show. It's movie week. He was practicing the Charleston with his dancer Lupa, and apparently he fell while trying to practice a jump. He's 62 years old, and he said, you know what? At the beginning of the series, he said, I'm not going to be the best physically for Strictly, and it proves that he's rung true with his words, and he will be sitting it out this week, but he's adamant to make a comeback next week, and he said, even if I'm on glitter crutches, you will see me on the Strictly dance floor, but he has to go for an MRI scan first, and God knows what they're going to say.
Right, OK, and this is nothing to do with getting publicity for him or the show.
I think it is, but it's bad publicity, because you don't want to be saying that one of your dancers by week 2 has already injured themselves twice.
And we've got a very quick couple of seconds to mention Philip's code.
He has a message for his haters, kiss his bottom. He flashed his derriere in an Instagram post for people who were criticising his Castaway show. Did you watch the episode?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, it was painfully 3 hours. But yeah, he has a message for his haters. He doesn't come across as a man who's quite remorseful, but quite egotistical instead.
Right, indeed. Thank you very much, Stephanie Tecci, Showbiz Suprema.
Thank you.
Queen Goddess today. OK, well, thank you very much for joining me this Saturday afternoon. Really appreciate your time. But don't go anywhere, because you have a fiery debate with Nana Akua coming up at, and then that's at 3 o'clock. And then at 6 o'clock, it's the Saturday 5. So all it is with me to say thank you for joining me. Hope you're having a lovely weekend out there. Stay tuned. Loads of good stuff coming up. I'm back with breakfast tomorrow. So lucky you, eh? Join me for a nice breakfast. But before we go anywhere and before Nana joins you, let's have a look at the weather. Here's your bulletin for you.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Looking ahead into Sunday, it's going to be turning cloudier with spells of rain and then showery as we go into the new week. But largely settled conditions out there through this afternoon as higher pressure is situated towards the east. Further towards the west, low pressure and frontal systems across Northern Ireland, that bringing some heavy spells of rain towards the west, but also across the West Country this evening, some heavy spells of rain across Devon and Cornwall. As that moves its way towards the north and east, generally fizzling out as it does so, but bringing increasing amounts of cloud across the UK. There may be some clear spells to see the northern lights towards the north, but otherwise temperatures generally mild at around 10 or 11 degrees. Now, as we go through Sunday morning, some clear skies to start the day, especially across northern parts of Scotland. So here, a bright start to the morning. Further towards the west, largely cloudy with outbreaks of rain. And across Northern Ireland, some patchy outbreaks of rain that could be quite heavy at times. Cloudy conditions across the northwest of England. But the best of the sunshine will really be focused across East Anglia as we start Sunday morning. But it won't last too long as the cloud